The dust hadn't settled from the stagecoach wheels before Evelyn knew something was wrong. She stood alone on the wooden platform at Silver Ridge Station, one hand gripping her leather suitcase, the other clutching the last letter Marcus Hale had sent her 3 weeks prior. The paper was soft from repeated reading, the ink smudged where her thumb had traced his promises. Security, partnership, a fresh beginning. The station was barely more than a shack with a crooked sign. Behind it stretched miles of nothing, red rock, scrub brush, and a sky so wide it made her chest ache. Boston had been cramped streets and narrow alleys, gas lamps and the constant press of bodies. This was Kong. No, not empty. Absence. Like something essential had been scraped away. "Miss, you waiting on someone?" Evelyn turned. The station clerk was an older man with sun-damaged skin and suspicious eyes. He'd been watching her since she stepped down, probably wondering what business a woman in a traveling dress had in a place like this. "Marcus Hale," she said. "He should be here to collect me." The clerk's expression shifted, something between pity and discomfort. "Hale, you said—" "Yes, we're to be married." He scratched his jaw, looking past her toward the empty road. "Ma'am, I don't mean to— Is there a problem?" "Ain't my place to say. But if Hale was supposed to meet you, he's running mighty late." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She'd traveled 17 days for this, sold what little she owned, burned bridges with her aunt who'd housed her since her parents died, ignored the warnings from every reasonable person who said mail-order marriage was desperation disguised as adventure. And maybe they'd been right. But returning to Boston meant returning to her aunt's parlor, to needlework and tea services, and the same 3 suitors who saw her as a convenience rather than a person. She'd chosen risk over suffocation. Now risk was all she had. "How far is the Hale Ranch?" she asked. 10 miles northwest, but ma'am, you can't just— I can hire a wagon." "Not at this hour. Sun's already dropping, and Pete's the only one does drives out that way. He won't go till morning." Evelyn looked west. The horizon was bleeding orange and red, the kind of sunset that would have been beautiful if it wasn't also a warning. She'd read enough dime novels to know frontier nights weren't kind to women traveling alone. "There a hotel?" "Boarding house. Mrs. Chen runs it, 2 blocks north." He hesitated. "You got money for lodging?" She did, but barely. The trip had cost more than expected, and she'd planned on Marcus covering expenses once she arrived. Now every dollar mattered. "I'll manage," she said. "Suit yourself?" The clerk turned away, clearly done with her problems. Evelyn picked up her suitcase and started walking. The case wasn't heavy. She'd brought only what fit. 3 dresses, undergarments, a brush. The book of poetry her mother had given her before the fever took her. Everything else she'd left behind. Silver Ridge wasn't really a town, just a collection of buildings scattered along a single dirt road. A general store with cracked windows. A saloon already leaking noise and lamplight. A stable that smelled like manure and hay. She passed 2 men loading a wagon, both of whom stopped to stare. One said something she didn't catch, and the other laughed. She kept walking. Mrs. Chen's boarding house was a narrow 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sign that read, "Rooms, clean beds, no credit." Evelyn climbed the steps and knocked. The woman who answered was compact and efficient-looking, her black hair streaked with gray and pulled into a tight bun. She looked Evelyn up and down without expression. "How many nights?" "1, maybe 2. $1 a night, pay up front." Evelyn opened her purse and counted out $2. Mrs. Chen took them, then stepped aside. "Room 3, top of the stairs. Outhouse is back. Breakfast at 6 if you want it. Costs extra." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You're the second girl this month showed up looking for a husband who ain't here." Evelyn froze halfway through the door. "What?" Mrs. Chen shrugged. "Frontiers full of men writing letters they can't keep promises on. Either they die, or they lie, or they get cold feet. You're better off than most. At least you got here before winter." "Marcus Hale sent for me. He owns a ranch." "Owned." The word hit like a slap. "What?" "Hale's dead. Happened 4, maybe 5 days ago. Heard it from Pete, who heard it from the doctor. Horse threw him, cracked his skull on a rock. Dead before anyone found him." The floor seemed to tilt. Evelyn reached for the door frame. "You all right?" Mrs. Chen's voice was flat, but her hand moved toward Evelyn's elbow. Yes, I just need room 3. Go lie down. I'll bring tea. Evelyn climbed the stairs on legs that didn't feel connected to her body. The room was small and plain, a bed, a washstand, a single chair by a window that overlooked the street. She set her suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Marcus's letter. Dear Miss Hart, your most recent correspondence brought me great pleasure. It heartens me to know a woman of your education and character would consider joining me here in New Mexico territory. I will not pretend the life is easy, but it is honest work on good land, and I believe we could build something worthwhile together. I have enclosed funds for your passage. Please arrive at Silver Ridge Station on the 8th of October, and I will meet you there. Yours in anticipation, Marcus Hale. She'd memorized every line, read them late at night in her aunt's house, imagining what kind of man wrote with such formality, whether he was tall or short, kind or cold, whether she'd feel anything when she saw him, or if it would be the practical arrangement they'd both agreed to. Now she'd never know. A knock at the door. Mrs. Chen entered with a cup of tea and set it on the washstand. Drink that. You look half dead. What am I supposed to do? Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she intended. Same as everyone else. Figure it out. Mrs. Chen moved toward the door, then paused. There's a foreman at the Hale place. Name's Reed. He might know more about your situation if you're fool enough to care. Why wouldn't I care? Because it ain't your problem anymore. Hale's dead, his ranch is someone else's trouble, and you got a ticket back to wherever you came from. Smart thing is to use it. I can't go back. Then you're dumber than you look. Mrs. Chen left, closing the door behind her. Evelyn sat in the growing dark, the tea cooling beside her. She thought about Boston, about her aunt's thin-lipped disappointment, about the narrow life that had been waiting for her there. She thought about Marcus Hale, a man she'd never met but who'd offered her something no one else had, a choice. Even if the choice was gone, the fact that she'd made it still mattered. She didn't sleep. Instead, she watched the window as Silver Ridge settled into night, the saloon noise rising and falling, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, the wind rattling the shutters. Somewhere out there was the ranch Marcus had written about, the land he'd promised to share, the life that had died with him. By the time dawn broke, she'd made her decision. She would go to the ranch, not because she had any claim to it, but because she needed to see it, needed to understand what she'd traveled so far for, even if it was already lost. At 6, she went downstairs. Mrs. Chen was serving breakfast to 3 men at a long table, fried eggs, hard bread, coffee that smelled like charcoal. I need to hire a wagon to the Hale Ranch, Evelyn said. One of the men looked up. He was young, maybe 25, with a crooked nose and a scar through one eyebrow. You the bride? I was supposed to be. Hell of a thing. Pete'll take you out there for $2. That's robbery, Mrs. Chen said. That's supply and demand. The man grinned. Pete knows he's the only game in town. Evelyn didn't have $2 to spare, but she nodded anyway. Where do I find him? Stable, South End. Tell him Cody sent you. He might knock off 50 cents. She paid Mrs. Chen for breakfast she didn't eat and walked to the stable. Pete turned out to be a thin man with tobacco-stained teeth and a permanent squint. He agreed to $1.50 after she mentioned Cody's name, though he made it clear he thought she was wasting her time. Nothing out there but a foreman and a couple ranch hands, he said, as they rattled out of town in a wagon that smelled like old wood and horse sweat. Hale didn't have family, no wife, no kids. Place will probably get sold off to pay debts. Did you know him? Little bit. Came into town for supplies once a month. Kept to himself mostly. Decent man, far as I could tell. What about Reed? Pete's expression shifted. Dawson Reed? Yeah, I know him. Good man. Tough, but fair. Been working for Hale near 2 years. Why would a good man work as a foreman? Why wouldn't he? Pays honest, works steady. Not everyone's got ambition to own things. The landscape opened up as they left Silver Ridge behind. Rolling hills covered in dry grass, mesas rising in the distance, the occasional twisted tree clinging to life in the scrub. It was beautiful in a desolate way, like something stripped down to essentials. After an hour, they crested a rise, and Pete pointed. There, Hale Ranch. It wasn't what Evelyn expected. The main house was small, wood frame, single story, with a covered porch. Behind it stood a barn, a corral, and a few outbuildings. Everything looked functional but worn, the kind of place that required constant work just to keep from falling apart. 2 horses were tied outside. A man was chopping wood near the barn, his back to them. Pete brought the wagon to a stop near the house. Want me to wait? No, I'll find my way back. Your funeral. He took her $1.50 and turned the wagon around, leaving her standing in the dust. The man chopping wood had stopped and was watching her. He set down the axe and started walking over. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and a face that looked like it had been weathered by sun and wind. He moved like someone who spent his life working with his hands. Help you? His voice was low and careful. I'm looking for Dawson Reed. You found him. Evelyn straightened. My name is Evelyn Hart. I came from Boston to marry Marcus Hale. Something crossed Reed's face. Surprise, then sympathy, then something harder to read. Hell, he said quietly. Nobody told you. I heard yesterday, at the station. Reed pulled off his gloves and ran a hand through his hair. You shouldn't have come out here. I needed to see it. See what? The place he described, the life he offered. Reed looked at her for a long moment, then gestured toward the house. Come inside. You look like you could use water. The house was dim and cool, sparsely furnished, a table, a few chairs, a stove in the corner. Everything was clean but worn, the kind of place where comfort was secondary to function. Reed poured her a cup of water from a pitcher and set it on the table. Sit. She sat. How much did he tell you about this place? Reed asked. Not much. That it was good land, that the work was honest, that we could build something together. He tell you about the debts? Evelyn's stomach dropped. No. Reed leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Marcus was a good man, but he wasn't a good businessman. He borrowed heavy to buy this land, and the cattle operation never caught up to the interest. By the time I signed on 2 years ago, he was already underwater. I helped him stabilize things, but it wasn't enough. How much does he owe? $3,000, maybe more, depending on how the estate settles. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. Evelyn had $47 left. What happens to the ranch? She asked. Bank will auction it off. Probably go to Silas Crow. He owns the big spread east of here. Been eyeing this land for years. He'll buy it cheap and fold it into his operation. And you? I'll find other work. Ranch hands always got options. Evelyn looked around the room, trying to reconcile the reality with Marcus's letters. He'd made it sound stable, secure, but maybe that had been hope more than honesty. Why did he send for me? She asked quietly, if things were this bad. Reed's expression softened. Loneliness, maybe. Or maybe he thought a partnership could change things. I don't know. Marcus didn't talk much about personal matters. Did he? She stopped, unsure how to ask. Did he mention me? Once. Said he'd written to a woman in Boston, that she seemed smart and capable. That's all. It shouldn't have hurt, hearing how little she'd meant to a dead man, but it did. Reed pushed off the counter. Look, I don't know what you're planning, but there's nothing here for you. Best thing you can do is head back to town. Get on the next stage east. I can't. Why not? Because I burned everything to come here. I don't have a home to go back to. Reed studied her, and she could see him reassessing. You got family? An aunt. We didn't part on good terms. Friends? None that would take me in. Money? Not enough. Reed swore under his breath. That's a hell of a situation. I'm aware. He paced to the window, looking out at the land. There's a boarding house in Silver Ridge, Mrs. Chen's place. You could stay there, find work maybe. Store might need help, or the saloon. I'm not working in a saloon. Then you got limited options. Evelyn stood. What if I stayed here? Reed turned. What? Stayed here. Worked. Helped run the place until it sells. That's insane. Is it? You said Marcus needed help. The ranch needs work. I can cook, clean, manage a household. This ain't Boston. This is a working ranch. We're up before dawn. We're fixing fences, moving cattle, hauling water. It's physical labor, and it's constant. Then teach me. Reed stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. You're serious? Completely. Why? Because I don't have anywhere else to go, and I'm not going to spend the next month sitting in a boarding house waiting for money to run out. If this place is going to be sold anyway, what difference does it make if I'm here? The difference is you're a woman alone on a ranch with 3 men you don't know. That's how rumors start, and out here, rumors can ruin a reputation. My reputation was ruined the moment I got on a train to marry a stranger. I'm past caring about respectability. Reed rubbed his face. This is a bad idea. Do you have a better one? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. 1 week, he finally said. You can stay 1 week. See if you can handle the work. If you can't, you go back to town and figure something else out. And if I can? We'll deal with that when it happens. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Deal, Evelyn said. Reed shook his head. You're either brave or stupid. Probably both. For the first time, something almost like a smile crossed his face. Come on, I'll show you where you can sleep and introduce you to the hands. The bunkhouse was separate from the main house, a long, low building with bunks lining both walls. 2 men were inside when Reed pushed open the door. This is Evelyn Hart, Reed said. She's going to be staying at the main house, helping out for a while. The older of the 2 men stood. He was maybe 50, with graying hair and a weathered face. Name's Jesse. That's Tomas. He nodded toward the younger man, who looked barely 20 with dark eyes and a quiet demeanor. Ma'am, Jesse said, you're the one was supposed to marry Marcus. Yes. Jesse's expression turned somber. I'm sorry. He was a good man. Thank you. Tomas said something in Spanish, too quick for Evelyn to catch. Jesse responded, and Tomas nodded, glancing at Evelyn with curiosity but no hostility. They'll be respectful, Reed said, but you need to pull your weight. No special treatment because you're a woman. I wouldn't expect any. Reed led her back to the main house and showed her a small room off the kitchen, barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a trunk. This was Marcus's room, Reed said. I've been sleeping in the barn, but you can have this. Where will you sleep? Barn's fine. I've slept in worse. Evelyn set her suitcase on the bed. The room smelled like dust and old wood, but it was clean. Dinner's at 7, Reed said from the doorway. We eat together, all of us. You cook, you eat first. That's the rule. I can cook. We'll see. He left, and Evelyn sat on the bed, the reality of what she'd agreed to settling over her. She was alone on a failing ranch with 3 men she didn't know, no money, no plan, and no idea how to survive frontier life. But she'd made a choice, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt like it was truly hers. That evening, she cooked dinner using what she found in the kitchen: beans, salt pork, biscuits made from flour and lard. It wasn't fancy, but it was edible. The men ate without complaint, though she caught Reed watching her more than once, like he was trying to figure out whether she'd last the week. After dinner, she washed the dishes while the men talked on the porch. Their voices drifted through the window, low and steady, discussing cattle counts and fence repairs and water sources. The rhythms of a life she didn't understand yet. Later, lying in the narrow bed, she listened to the sounds of the ranch settling, horses moving in the corral, wind rattling the shutters, the distant call of a coyote. It was so different from Boston, where night meant carriages and footsteps, and the hum of a city that never fully slept. Here, night was vast and empty, and she was a small thing trying to find her place in it. She thought about Marcus Hale, wondered what kind of man he'd been, whether they would have been happy or just functional. She thought about Reed, the careful way he'd spoken to her, the doubt in his eyes that said he expected her to fail. Maybe she would, but she'd fail trying, and that was better than never trying at all. The next morning, Reed woke her before dawn. Time to work, he said through the door. Evelyn dressed quickly in her plainest dress and met him outside. The sky was still dark, stars fading as the horizon began to lighten. First lesson, Reed said. Chickens. He led her to a small coop behind the house. Inside were a dozen hens, already stirring and clucking. You collect eggs every morning, check for broody hens, make sure they got food and water. Simple. Evelyn stepped into the coop. The hens scattered, squawking. "They won't bite," Reed said. She reached into the first nesting box and pulled out 2 warm eggs. It was oddly satisfying, the weight of them in her palm. By the time she finished, she had a basket full of eggs and a better understanding of why farmers woke so early. Animals didn't care about human schedules. Reed walked her through the rest of the morning routine, feeding the horses, checking water troughs, noting which fences needed repair. It was repetitive, physical work that left her arms aching and her dress dusty, but there was a logic to it. Everything connected. Neglect one thing, and the whole system suffered. "You're keeping up," Reed said around midday as they walked back toward the house. "Did you think I wouldn't? Honestly? Yeah. I'm tougher than I look. Maybe. But being tough don't mean you're suited for this life." "What does?" Reed considered. "Stubbornness. The kind that don't quit even when quitting makes sense." "Then I should do fine." He almost smiled again. "We'll see." The first week passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Evelyn learned to muck stalls, mend fences, cook meals for 4 over a wood stove that required constant attention. Her hands blistered and calloused. Her back ached in new ways. But she didn't quit. The men warmed to her slowly. Jessie started teaching her Spanish phrases, laughing when she mispronounced them. Tomas showed her how to approach a skittish horse without spooking it. Reed remained cautious, but the doubt in his eyes faded into something closer to grudging respect. On the 8th day, he found her repairing a fence post that had come loose. "Your week's up," he said. Evelyn looked up, hammer in hand. "I know." "You planning to leave?" "No." Reed crossed his arms. "Why not?" "Because I'm not done yet." "Done with what?" She gestured at the ranch around them. "This. Figuring out what I'm capable of." Reed was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right. You can stay, but things are going to get complicated." "How?" "The bank's sending someone next week to assess the property. Once that happens, the auction process starts. We got maybe a month before this place gets sold out from under us." "What happens to you and the others?" "We move on, find other work." "And me?" "You figure it out, same as everyone else." It should have scared her, the precariousness of it all. But instead she felt something else. Determination. She'd come to this place expecting one life and found another. The ranch was failing, the future uncertain, but she was still here, still standing. That had to count for something. That night, after dinner, Reed stayed behind while the others went to the bunkhouse. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Why'd you really come west? And don't tell me it was just about Marcus." Evelyn set down the dish she was washing. "I came because staying in Boston meant living a life someone else chose for me. My aunt wanted me to marry a banker's son who collected butterflies and talked about his digestion at dinner. I wanted something different. Even if different meant marrying a stranger? At least it would have been my choice." Reed nodded slowly. "That makes sense, I guess." "What about you?" Evelyn asked. "Why work as a foreman instead of owning your own place?" "Owning land means owing banks. I've seen too many men lose everything trying to hold on to something that was never really theirs. Working for someone else means you can walk away when things go bad." "Is that what you'll do? Walk away?" "Probably. Doesn't that bother you?" "Should it?" Evelyn turned back to the dishes. "I don't know. I just thought people came west to build something permanent. Some do. Others come because everywhere else stopped making sense." She understood that more than she wanted to admit. The following week, a man arrived from the bank, a thin, nervous clerk named Whitmore, who spent 2 days examining the property, counting cattle, reviewing ledgers. He barely spoke to anyone except Reed, and when he left, his expression was grim. 3 weeks, Reed told Evelyn that night. "That's how long we have before the auction." "Can't we do anything?" "Like what?" "I don't know. Find the money to pay off the debt?" Reed laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what? We'd need $3,000, and none of us got that kind of money. There has to be something." "There isn't. This is how it works out here. You fight until you can't, and then you let go." But Evelyn wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. She started going through Marcus's papers, letters, receipts, contracts. Most of it was mundane, but buried in a drawer, she found something strange. A survey map showing the ranch property with notation she didn't understand. Lines marked in red, numbers scribbled in margins. She brought it to Reed. "What is this?" Reed studied the map. "Looks like a land survey. Marcus must have had it done a while back." "Why?" "Property disputes, probably. Making sure his boundaries were right." "But look at these markings. They go beyond the ranch property." Reed frowned. So? "So why would Marcus care about land that wasn't his?" "Maybe he was thinking of buying more." "With what money?" Reed didn't have an answer. Evelyn traced the red lines with her finger. They extended east, cutting through what she assumed was Silas Crow's territory. "Who's Crow?" she asked. "I told you, big rancher, owns most of the land east of here. He's the one who'll probably buy this place at auction. You think Marcus was in a dispute with him?" "Marcus didn't like Crow much, but that was personal. Crow's the type who thinks owning land makes him better than everyone else." Evelyn folded the map carefully. "I want to know more about this." "Why? It don't change anything." "Maybe not. But it's strange, and strange usually means something." Reed gave her a long look. "You're stubborn, you know that?" "You said that was a requirement for frontier life." "Didn't say it was a good thing." But he didn't stop her from keeping the map. Over the next few days, Evelyn asked questions, casually, carefully. She talked to Jesse about the land, about boundaries and disputes. She asked Tomas if he'd ever worked for Crow. She even rode into town with Reed when he went for supplies and listened to the gossip at the general store. What she learned troubled her. Silas Crow was aggressive about expanding his holdings. He'd bought up 3 smaller ranches in the past 2 years, always at auction, always cheap. Some people said he had the bank in his pocket. Others said he just knew how to wait for men to fail. And Marcus Hale had been failing. But there was something else, rumors about a railway. The territorial government was planning a new line to connect Silver Ridge with towns further east. The exact route wasn't finalized, but speculation was driving up land values in certain areas. Areas that matched the red lines on Marcus's map. Evelyn showed the map to Reed again that night. "What if Marcus knew about the railway?" she said. "What if that's why Crow wants this land?" Reed's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm asking questions." "Questions like that can get you in trouble out here." "Then help me find answers." Reed was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "If Crow knew about the railway, he'd do everything he could to buy this land before the route was announced. Once it's public, the value would spike. And if Marcus knew too? Then maybe he wasn't as bad at business as I thought." They sat with that possibility, the implications spreading between them. "What do we do?" Evelyn asked. "Nothing. There's nothing we can do. Even if you're right, even if Crow's been positioning himself to profit off the railway, it don't change the fact that this ranch is in debt and about to be auctioned. But if we could prove what? That Crow's smart? That ain't illegal." "What if he did something illegal?" Reed stood abruptly. "Stop. You're chasing shadows." "Am I?" "Yes. And even if you're not, it don't matter. Crow's got money and influence. We got nothing. You want to survive out here, you learn to pick battles you can win." He walked out, leaving Evelyn alone with the map. She knew he was probably right. Knew she was grasping at threads because the alternative was accepting that everything she'd worked for would disappear in 3 weeks. But she couldn't let it go. The next day, she rode into town alone. It took her 2 hours on a borrowed horse, and by the time she arrived, her legs were aching and her determination wavering. But she tied the horse outside the land office and went inside. The clerk was a bored-looking man named Patterson. "Help you?" "I'm looking for information about railway surveys in this area." Patterson's expression sharpened. "Why?" "Personal interest. Railway planning is territorial business. Not public record yet." "When will it be?" "When the territorial governor announces the route. Could be next month, could be next year." "But there are surveys happening now?" "Probably. I couldn't say for sure." Evelyn changed tactics. If someone wanted to buy land along a potential railway route, how would they know where to buy? Patterson leaned back. "They wouldn't, unless they had inside information, which would be—" He trailed off, realizing what he was implying. "Illegal?" Evelyn finished. "I didn't say that. But it would be." Patterson shuffled papers on his desk. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're fishing for, but I suggest you drop it. Powerful men don't like questions about their business." "What if those powerful men are cheating?" Then they're still powerful, and you're still nobody. The words stung because they were true. Evelyn left the land office with more questions than answers. She rode back to the ranch as the sun dropped toward the horizon, the landscape turning gold and red. By the time she arrived, Reed was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. "Where were you?" "Town." "Why?" "Looking for answers." Reed's jaw tightened. "I told you to drop it, and I told you I can't. You're going to get yourself hurt." "I'm already hurt. I came here for a life that doesn't exist. The least I can do is understand why." Reed stepped off the porch, closing the distance between them. "You want to know why? Because men like Crow take what they want, and people like us survive by staying out of their way. That's the frontier. That's reality. Then reality needs to change. You can't change it." "Maybe not, but I can try." Reed stared at her, frustration and something else warring in his expression. Finally, he shook his head. "You're going to get us all in trouble. I'll take the blame if it comes to that. That's not how it works out here. Trouble spreads." "Then help me make sure there's no trouble to spread." Reed looked away toward the horizon where the sun was sinking. "What exactly do you want from me? Help me find proof. If Crow's manipulating land deals or using inside information about the railway, there has to be evidence. Letters, contracts, something. And if we find it, we take it to the territorial authorities. You think they'll care?" "I think they'll have to." Reed was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If we do this, we do it smart. No rushing in, no making noise. We find proof first, then we decide what to do with it." "Agreed." "And if we don't find anything, then we let it go." Reed nodded slowly. "All right, but I'm doing this to keep you from getting killed, not because I think it'll work. I'll take it." They started that night going through Marcus's papers more carefully, looking for anything connected to Crow or the railway. Most of it was routine: bills, receipts, letters about cattle sales. But buried near the bottom of a trunk, Evelyn found a folder marked "Confidential." Inside were copies of correspondence between Marcus and a surveyor named J. Ashford. The letters discussed land values, potential railway routes, and concerns about irregularities in neighboring property claims. One letter stood out. "Mr. Hale, per your request, I have reviewed the survey records for the Crow holdings adjacent to your property. I must report several discrepancies that warrant further investigation. The boundaries as recorded do not match the actual survey markers, suggesting either gross incompetence or deliberate falsification. I recommend you bring this matter to the attention of the Territorial Land Office before proceeding with any transactions. Respectfully, J. Ashford." Evelyn handed the letter to Reed. He read it twice. "This says Crow's property records are falsified, which means he's claiming land that isn't his. If this is true, it's fraud, big enough to ruin him." "Did Marcus report it?" Reed flipped through the other papers. "I don't see anything. Maybe he was planning to. Or maybe someone stopped him before he could." Reed looked up sharply. "You think Crow killed Marcus?" "I think Marcus died conveniently, right before the ranch went up for auction, right when Crow could buy it cheap." "That's a hell of an accusation." "It's a hell of a coincidence." Reed set the letter down. "Even if you're right, how do we prove it? Marcus is dead, the surveyor might be gone, and Crow's got the money to bury anything that threatens him. We find J. Ashford, see if he'll testify. And if he won't, then we find another way." Reed studied her. "You really don't quit, do you?" "Not when it matters." "This matters to you? A ranch you got no claim to, run by a man you never met?" Evelyn met his eyes. "It matters because it's wrong, and because if I don't fight for something, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference." Reed was quiet. Then he nodded. "All right, we find Ashford." The search took 3 days. Reed asked questions in town, tracked down leads, called in favors from people he knew. Finally, he learned that J. Ashford had moved to Santa Fe 2 months ago, working for the Territorial Surveyor's Office. "That's 2 days' ride," Reed said. "Then we ride." "Evelyn, I'm going, with or without you." Reed swore. "Fine, but we do this my way. We go quiet. We don't draw attention. And if things go bad, you listen to me. Understood?" "Understood." They left the next morning, telling Jesse and Tomas they were going to check on potential buyers for some of the cattle. It wasn't a complete lie. They needed money, and selling livestock was one option, but it was close enough to make Evelyn uncomfortable. The ride to Santa Fe was long and hard. They camped one night under stars so thick they seemed to press down from above, the silence broken only by coyotes and the crackle of their fire. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "Go ahead." "Why are you helping me?" Reed poked at the fire. "Because you asked." "That's not a real answer." He was quiet for a moment. "I signed on to work for Marcus because he was decent. He treated people fair, paid on time, didn't ask for more than he gave. When he died, I figured I'd work till the ranch sold, then move on. That's how it goes." But you showed up, and you didn't run when things got hard. You stayed and you worked and you asked questions nobody else bothered to ask. That means something. It means I'm stubborn. It means you care. That's rarer than you think." Evelyn looked at him across the fire. In the flickering light, his face was all shadows and angles, the weathered features of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that reminded her why she'd trusted him in the first place. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. We don't know what we're walking into." They reached Santa Fe the next afternoon. The territorial surveyor's office was a squat adobe building near the plaza. Inside, a clerk directed them to Jay Ashford's desk. Ashford was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers. He looked up as they approached. "Help you?" "Mr. Ashford," Reed said, "we're here about a survey you did for Marcus Hale, property in Silver Ridge." Ashford's expression shifted, recognition, then wariness. "I remember Mr. Hale. I heard he passed. My condolences." "We have some questions about your findings," Evelyn said. "What kind of questions?" Reed pulled out the letter. "You wrote that Silas Crow's property records showed irregularities. Can you elaborate?" Ashford glanced at the letter, then looked around the office. "Perhaps we should speak outside." They followed him into the plaza, where he led them to a bench away from foot traffic. "Look," Ashford said quietly, "I did that survey for Mr. Hale as a favor. What I found was concerning, but I'm a surveyor, not a lawman. I reported my findings to him, and that was the end of my involvement." "What exactly did you find?" Evelyn asked. Ashford hesitated. Crow's property lines didn't match the recorded survey. The discrepancies added up to nearly 200 acres, land he claimed that wasn't legally his. "How is that possible?" "Falsified documents, bribed officials, or both. I couldn't prove which, so I advised Mr. Hale to report it to the land office." "Did he?" "I don't know. We didn't correspond after that letter." Reed leaned forward. "Would you be willing to testify to what you found?" Ashford's face paled. "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because Silas Crow is a dangerous man. The last surveyor who challenged his claims ended up dead in a ditch, officially ruled an accident. I have a family. I'm not risking them for a land dispute that doesn't concern me." "It concerns justice," Evelyn said. "Justice don't feed my children, ma'am. I told Mr. Hale what I found. What he did with that information was his business. Now it's yours. But I won't be part of it." Ashford stood and walked away, leaving them on the bench. "Well," Reed said, "that was a waste of time." "No," Evelyn said slowly, "it wasn't." "How do you figure?" "Because now we know. Crow's records are falsified, and he's willing to kill to protect that secret. Knowing and proving are different things. Then we find proof he can't deny." Reed looked at her. "You're talking about going after Crow directly. I'm talking about finding evidence, his records, his correspondence, something that proves fraud." "And where do you propose we find that? His house?" Evelyn met his eyes. "If that's what it takes." "You're insane." "Probably, but I'm also right." Reed shook his head. "Even if we could get into Crow's place, even if we found evidence, bringing it forward would make us targets. Only if he knows it was us. He'd figure it out. Then we make sure we have enough evidence that it doesn't matter." Reed was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. "I'm going to regret this." "Maybe, but you'll regret walking away more." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." They rode back to Silver Ridge the next day, a plan forming between them. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it was the only option that didn't end in surrender. They would get into Crow's ranch house, They would find the documents that proved fraud, and they would bring them to the territorial authorities before the auction. If they succeeded, they'd save the ranch and expose a corrupt landowner. If they failed, they'd lose everything. But Evelyn had already lost everything once. The second time didn't scare her nearly as much. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Silas Crow hosted a monthly gathering at his ranch, poker games and whiskey for the wealthier landowners in the territory. Reed had heard about them from Jesse, who'd once worked briefly on Crow's spread before the man's temper drove him off. The next gathering was in 5 days. "That's when we go," Evelyn said, spreading Marcus's map across the kitchen table. While he's distracted with his guests, Reed traced the property lines with his finger. Crow's house sits in the center of his land. 2 miles from the main road, guards posted at the gate. Even during a party, someone's watching. "Then we don't go through the gate." "You suggesting we sneak onto his property on foot?" "Unless you have a better idea." Reed leaned back, arms crossed. "This is insane. You know that, right? You've said that before." "Bears repeating." Evelyn met his eyes. "We're running out of time. The auction's in 2 weeks. If we don't act now, Crow gets the ranch and buries whatever evidence exists. And if we get caught, we don't. That's not a plan. That's wishful thinking." "Then help me make it a real plan." Reed exhaled through his nose, the way he always did when she'd backed him into a corner. "Fine, but we do reconnaissance first. I want to see the layout, know where the guards patrol, figure out entry and exit points." "When?" "Tomorrow night. Just watching. Nothing else." "Agreed." Jesse walked in carrying firewood, glancing between them. "You two plotting something?" "No," Reed said too quickly. Jesse set the wood by the stove. "You're terrible liars, both of you. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Crow's got a mean streak and enough money to make problems disappear." "We're not planning anything," Evelyn said. Jesse gave her a long look. Marcus used to get that same stubborn expression right before he did something stupid. Didn't end well for him. He left before either of them could respond. "He knows," Evelyn said quietly. "He suspects. That's different." "Should we tell him?" "No, the fewer people involved, the better. If this goes wrong, I don't want Jesse or Tomas caught in it." Evelyn understood the logic, but it still felt wrong keeping secrets from men who'd welcomed her without question. They spent the next day preparing. Reed checked his rifle, cleaned his revolver, gathered rope and dark clothing. Evelyn watched him work, the methodical efficiency of someone who'd learned survival through experience rather than books. "You ever done anything like this before?" she asked. "Breaking into a rich man's house?" "No." "But you've done dangerous things." Reed didn't look up from oiling the rifle. "I've done what needed doing. That's different than seeking out trouble." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Seeking trouble?" "I think you're not scared enough of consequences." "Maybe consequences don't scare me because I've already lost everything that mattered." Reed's hands stilled. He set down the rifle and looked at her. "That's not true." "Isn't it? I left my family, my home, traveled 2,000 miles to marry a dead man, and now I'm squatting on a failing ranch with no future. What exactly haven't I lost?" "Yourself." The word hung between them. "What?" "You haven't lost yourself," Reed said. "A lot of people would have given up by now, gone back east, found some other arrangement, settled for whatever life offered. But you're still here, still fighting. That means you haven't lost the part that matters." Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. They left after sunset the next evening, riding east toward Crow's Land. The moon was a thin crescent, offering just enough light to navigate without being obvious. Reed led the way, moving with the confidence of someone who knew how to travel unseen. After an hour, he dismounted and tied his horse to a juniper. Evelyn did the same. "We walk from here," Reed whispered. "Stay close, step where I step, and if I signal to get down, you drop immediately. Understood?" "Yes." They moved through the scrub, Reed navigating by starlight and instinct. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, every sound amplified, their footsteps, the rustle of her skirt against brush, an owl calling somewhere in the darkness. After 20 minutes, Reed dropped to a crouch. Evelyn sank beside him. Ahead, lights flickered through the darkness. Crow's ranch house sat like a small fortress, 2 stories, stone construction, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Lamplight spilled from windows, and voices carried on the night air. "There," Reed breathed, pointing. Two men stood near the main gate, rifles slung over their shoulders. They were talking, not particularly alert, but positioned where they could see anyone approaching the main entrance. "How many do you think he has?" Evelyn whispered. "At least 4. Maybe more inside." They watched for an hour, noting patterns. The guards at the gate rotated every 30 minutes. Another man patrolled the perimeter on horseback, making a circuit every 20 minutes. The back of the house faced the corrals, and a kitchen door opened periodically as servants moved between the house and a separate cooking building. "That's our entry point," Reed said, nodding toward the kitchen door. "During the party, servants will be moving in and out constantly. We time it right. We can slip in with the chaos. And once we're inside, find Crow's office, search for documents, get out before anyone notices." That's a lot of things that could go wrong. That's why we're doing reconnaissance first. They watched for another hour, until Reed was satisfied he understood the guard rotation and building layout. Then they crept back to the horses and rode home in silence. Back at the ranch, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in Marcus's narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Best case, they found evidence and escaped unnoticed. Worst case, they got caught, and Crow made them disappear the way he'd apparently done to the surveyor who challenged him. The middle scenarios were what worried her most. Getting caught without evidence, being identified but escaping, finding proof but losing it before they could act on it. "You awake?" Reed's voice came from outside the door. "Yes." "Can I come in?" "It's your house." Reed entered, leaving the door open for propriety. He sat in the single chair, elbows on his knees. "I need to know you understand what we're risking," he said. "I understand." "Do you? Because once we do this, there's no going back. If Crow finds out, he won't just ruin us. He'll kill us." "I know." "Then why are you so calm?" Evelyn sat up. "I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I'm also angry. Marcus died, and maybe it was an accident, but maybe it wasn't. Either way, Crow's been manipulating land deals and stealing property, and nobody's stopping him because he's rich and connected. If we don't try, who will? The law. The law hasn't done anything yet." Reed rubbed his face. "You got more faith in justice than I do." "It's not faith. It's desperation." "That might be more honest." They sat in the quiet darkness, the weight of what they were planning settling over them. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "Go ahead." "If this works, if we save the ranch, what happens then?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. The debts still exist. Even if Crow doesn't buy the place, someone else will." "What if we could pay the debts?" "With what money?" "The railway. If Marcus's land is on the route, the value increases. We could sell part of it, use the proceeds to pay off the bank. That's assuming the railway route goes through here, which we don't know for certain. But it's possible. A lot of things are possible. Doesn't make them likely." Evelyn pulled her knees to her chest. "I just want to believe there's a way forward that doesn't end with us losing everything. There might be. But even if there is, it's going to be hard-fought and uncertain. That's frontier life." "Is it always this difficult?" "Usually worse." Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. "You're terrible at encouragement." "Never claimed otherwise." Reed stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're stubborn. Makes this less lonely." He left before she could respond. The next 3 days passed in tense preparation. Reed taught Evelyn how to move quietly, how to read guard patterns, how to stay calm under pressure. They went over the plan repeatedly, identifying weaknesses and adjusting. Jesse watched them with increasing concern, but didn't interfere. Tomas seemed oblivious, focused on his work with the horses. On the night of Crow's gathering, they dressed in dark clothing and left the ranch after dinner. Jesse caught Reed's arm as they headed to the horses. "Whatever you're doing, don't get killed. This place has lost enough already." "We'll be careful." "Careful don't mean much against men like Crow." "I know." Jesse released him. "Then go with sense, if not luck." They rode toward Crow's property in silence, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down like physical force. Evelyn's hands trembled on the reins, and she gripped tighter to hide it. "You can still back out," Reed said. "No, I can't." Why not? Because you won't go without me, and someone needs to do this. Reed didn't argue because they both knew she was right. They left the horses a mile from Crow's ranch and covered the rest on foot. The night was cold and clear. Stars spread across the sky like scattered salt. As they approached the property, music and laughter drifted through the darkness, Crow's party in full swing. They circled wide, avoiding the main gate where guards stood watch. The patrol rider passed them twice, close enough that Evelyn held her breath, but the darkness and scrub concealed them. At the back of the property, they crouched behind a water trough, watching the kitchen door. Servants moved in and out carrying trays of food and bottles of whiskey. The timing was irregular, sometimes 3 minutes between movements, sometimes 30 seconds. We wait for a cluster, Reed whispered. When multiple servants are moving, we slip in behind them. Evelyn nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. Evelyn's legs cramped from crouching, and her heart hammered so hard she was certain someone would hear it. Then it happened. 3 servants emerged at once, hurrying toward the cooking building with empty trays. Reed grabbed Evelyn's hand and they moved, fast and low, slipping through the kitchen door as 2 servants entered from the other side. Inside was chaos. Heat from stoves, smoke, shouting in English and Spanish. A woman barked orders while men scrambled to prepare food. No one looked at Evelyn and Reed as they pressed against the wall and edged toward the interior door. Reed tried the handle. Locked. Damn, he breathed. A servant rushed past carrying a tray of glasses. Another followed with whiskey bottles. Reed waited until the traffic cleared, then pulled a thin piece of wire from his pocket and worked the lock. It clicked open. They slipped through into a hallway. Suddenly, the noise of the kitchen cut off, replaced by music and male laughter from somewhere deeper in the house. The hallway was dim, lit by a few oil lamps with doors on either side. Reed pointed left. They moved carefully, testing each door. Most were locked. One opened to a linen closet, another to a bedroom that smelled like cigars and perfume. At the end of the hall, a larger door stood slightly ajar. Reed peered through, then motioned Evelyn forward. The office was exactly what she'd imagined. Dark wood furniture, leather chairs, a massive desk covered in papers. Bookshelves lined one wall, and a safe sat in the corner. They slipped inside and Reed closed the door carefully, wedging a chair under the handle. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices something's wrong," he whispered. "Start with the desk. I'll check the safe." Evelyn moved to the desk and began sorting through papers. Bills of sale, correspondence, property deeds, all seemingly legitimate. She checked drawers, finding more of the same. Behind her, Reed worked the safe. "It's locked. I can't crack it." "Keep trying." Evelyn opened the bottom drawer and found a leather portfolio. Inside were land surveys, multiple properties, all marked with dates and values. She scanned through them, looking for irregularities. Then she found it. A survey of Marcus's property, dated 3 months before his death, with notations in red ink. Potential railway route confirmed through north section. Estimated value increase 400%. Acquisition priority, urgent. Below that, a letter from someone named Garrett, addressed to Crow. "Silas, the equipment issue has been handled as discussed. Hail won't be a problem moving forward. Proceed with acquisition plans once the state settles. Railway announcement expected within 6 months. Your investment will triple at minimum." G. Evelyn's hands shook as she read it again. Equipment issue. It wasn't explicit, but combined with Marcus's death from a horse accident, equipment failure, the implication was clear. "Reed." He turned from the safe. She held up the letter. "They killed him. Crow had Marcus killed." Reed crossed the room and read the letter, his expression darkening. "That's not proof. It's suggestive, but a good lawyer could argue it means anything." "What about the survey?" "It proves Crow knew about the railway route before it was public." "Inside information isn't illegal unless we can prove corruption." "Then what do we—" Footsteps in the hallway. They froze. The steps paused outside the office door. The handle rattled. "It's stuck," a male voice said. "Try harder," another responded. Reed grabbed Evelyn's arm and pulled her toward the window. He unlatched it and pushed it open, cold air rushing in. "We have to jump." "It's a 2-story drop. There's a roof below. Move!" The door crashed open behind them. A man shouted. Evelyn didn't think, just climbed through the window and dropped. She hit the lower roof hard, pain shooting through her ankle, and rolled. Reed landed beside her, already moving. Go! They scrambled across the roof to the edge and jumped again, this time hitting the ground. Evelyn's ankle screamed, but she ran, clutching the portfolio against her chest. Behind them, more shouting. A gunshot cracked through the night. Reed grabbed her hand and they sprinted into the darkness, zigzagging through the corrals and outbuildings. Another shot. Something whizzed past Evelyn's ear. They reached the scrub and dove into it, thorns tearing at their clothes. Behind them, lights bobbed, men with lanterns giving chase. This way, Reed hissed, pulling her deeper into the brush. They ran until Evelyn's lungs burned, and her ankle couldn't support her weight anymore. She stumbled and Reed caught her. I can't. You have to. He pulled her arm over his shoulder and half carried her forward. The voices behind them grew distant, but didn't disappear. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, they reached the horses. Reed lifted Evelyn into the saddle and they rode, pushing the animals hard through the darkness. Only when they were miles from Crow's property did Reed slow. Evelyn slumped forward, gasping. You still have the portfolio? She held it up, somehow still clutched in her hand. Then it was worth it. They shot at us. I noticed. What if they recognized us? Then we've got bigger problems than I thought. They rode the rest of the way in silence, both too exhausted and shaken to talk. When they reached the ranch, Jesse was waiting on the porch, rifle across his knees. Heard gunshots east of here about an hour ago, he said. Figured it was you. We're fine, Reed said. You don't look fine. You look like you kicked a hornet's nest. Close enough. Reed helped Evelyn down. She couldn't put weight on her ankle. She hurt? Twisted ankle. I'll wrap it. Jesse stood. Whatever you found, better be worth it. It is, Evelyn said. Inside, Reed wrapped her ankle while she laid out the papers from the portfolio on the kitchen table. Jesse and Tomas gathered around, studying them. This says Crow knew about the railway, Jesse said, reading the survey. And this letter, equipment issue handled. You think that means Marcus? I think it means Crow had him killed and made it look like an accident, Evelyn said. Tomas spoke rapidly in Spanish. Jesse translated. He says Marcus's saddle broke. The girth strap snapped clean through. Everyone assumed it was worn leather, but Tomas thought it looked like it had been cut part way and left to fail. Reed's jaw tightened. Did he tell anyone? Who would he tell? The sheriff works for Crow half the time. We take this to the territorial marshal, Evelyn said. Someone outside Crow's influence. That's in Santa Fe, Reed said. 2 days' ride. Then we leave tomorrow. Evelyn, you can barely walk. I'll manage. Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but Jesse interrupted. She's right. You got evidence of fraud and maybe murder. That needs to reach someone who can act on it before Crow figures out what you took. He already knows we broke in, Reed said. Question is whether he knows who we are. If you don't know yet, he will soon. Small territory people talk. You need to move fast. Reed nodded slowly. All right. We leave at first light. Jesse, you and Tomas keep things running here. If anyone comes asking questions, you don't know anything. Wasn't planning on winning any honesty prizes, Jesse said dryly. They spent the night taking turns on watch, afraid Crow might send men to the ranch. But dawn came without incident, pale and cold. Evelyn's ankle had swollen overnight, purple and tender. Reed wrapped it tighter and helped her into the saddle. The portfolio was tucked in his saddlebag, wrapped in oilcloth for protection. You need anything? You fire 3 shots, Reed told Jesse. We'll hear it. Just go, and try not to get killed. They rode toward Santa Fe as the sun climbed, both watching the trail behind them for pursuit. Evelyn's ankle throbbed with every movement, but she gritted her teeth and said nothing. By midday, they'd covered 15 miles. Reed let the horses rest near a stream while they ate the bread and dried meat Jesse had packed. You think the marshal will believe us? Evelyn asked. If the evidence is solid, he won't have a choice. And if Crow has influence there too, then we find someone else. Federal territorial governor, maybe? Someone has to care about fraud and murder. You don't sound convinced. Reed skipped a stone across the water. I've seen a lot of rich men get away with things because they could afford to, but I've also seen justice work when people push hard enough. We just have to push. They rode through the afternoon, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, Reed found a sheltered spot in a canyon and called a halt. "We camp here. Too dangerous to travel at night with you injured." Evelyn slid from the saddle, biting back a gasp as her ankle hit the ground. Reed caught her before she fell. "Let me see it." He unwrapped the bandage. The swelling had worsened, the bruising spreading across her foot. "Might be broken," he said. "It's not." "How do you know?" "Because I'm choosing to believe it's not." Despite the situation, Reed almost smiled. "That's not how bones work." "Then I'll deal with reality later." He rewrapped the ankle and built a small fire, keeping it low to avoid drawing attention. They ate more of Jesse's provisions and sat in silence, watching stars emerge. "Can I ask you something?" Reed said eventually. "Always." "Why does this matter so much to you? Honest answer." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because my whole life, I was told to accept things. Accept my parents dying. Accept living with an aunt who resented me. Accept marrying whoever would have me. I accepted all of it because I thought that's what you did. You accepted what life gave you and made the best of it. And now? Now I think accepting everything is just another way of giving up. Marcus offered me a choice, even if he didn't live to see it through. And somewhere along the way, this place became mine. Not legally, not formally, but mine in the way that matters. I chose it. So fighting for it isn't about the land or the money. It's about not giving up the first thing I ever really chose." Reed stared at the fire. "That makes sense. Does it?" "Yeah, I spent most of my life moving from place to place, never settling because settling meant vulnerability. You can't lose what you don't have. But watching you fight for something you got no legal claim to makes me think maybe I've been wrong. Maybe having something worth losing is better than having nothing at all." "Is that why you're helping me?" "Partly. Also because you're stubborn as hell, and I figure you'd try this alone if I didn't come." "You're probably right." They settled into their bedrolls, taking turns on watch. During Evelyn's shift, she heard horses in the distance, 3 or 4 riders moving fast. She woke Reed immediately. He listened, then swore quietly. "Could be anyone. Or it could be Crow's men. If it is, they're moving too fast to track us in the dark, but we leave before dawn, just in case." They broke camp while the sky was still black, riding by starlight until the sun rose. Evelyn's ankle was worse. The swelling had spread to her calf, and every jar of the horse's gait sent fire through her leg. But she didn't ask to stop. By afternoon, they reached Santa Fe. The town was larger than Silver Ridge, with real streets and adobe buildings clustered around a central plaza. The territorial marshal's office was near the courthouse. Inside, a deputy looked up from his desk. He was young, maybe 25, with suspicious eyes. "Help you?" "We need to see the marshal," Reed said. "It's urgent." "He's busy. You can leave a message." "This can't wait." The deputy's hand moved toward his gun. "I said he's busy." "We have evidence of fraud and murder," Evelyn said. "Committed by Silas Crow." The deputy's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like fear. "You need to leave." "We're not leaving until—" "I said leave." The deputy stood, hand on his weapon now. "And if you know what's good for you, you'll forget about Crow and whatever you think you know." Reed's voice dropped dangerously low. "You work for him?" "I work for the marshal, and the marshal don't appreciate people making wild accusations against respected landowners." "So Crow owns the marshal too," Evelyn said. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The deputy drew his gun. "Get out. Now." Reed grabbed Evelyn's arm and pulled her toward the door. Outside, she was shaking, from pain, from anger, from the realization that they'd risked everything for nothing. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We find someone who can't be bought." "Who?" Reed was silent for a moment, thinking. Then his expression cleared. "The territorial governor. He's appointed by the federal government, answers to Washington. Crow might have local influence, but he can't buy everyone. How do we reach the governor?" "His office is in the Capitol building. We go there, we demand an audience, and we don't leave until someone listens." They walked across the plaza, Evelyn limping badly now. Reed stayed close, supporting her weight when she needed it. The Capitol building was imposing, 2 stories of stone and wood with territorial flags hanging from the entrance. Inside, a clerk sat behind a desk, looking bored. "We need to see the governor," Reed said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "Then you can't see him. Leave a request and he'll respond within 6 to 8 weeks. This is urgent. Everything's urgent. That's why we have a scheduling system." Evelyn stepped forward. "We have evidence of a murder plot and land fraud. If the governor doesn't see us today, that evidence disappears and a corrupt rancher continues operating unchecked." The clerk looked at her properly for the first time. "What kind of evidence?" "Documents proving Silas Crow orchestrated a murder and manipulated land surveys for financial gain." The clerk's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Wait here." He disappeared through a door behind his desk. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the door opened and a tall man in a dark suit emerged. He was maybe 50, with gray hair and sharp eyes. "I'm Governor Maxwell. You have 2 minutes to convince me why I should waste my time on this." Reed pulled out the portfolio and spread the documents on the desk. Silas Crow knew about an upcoming railway route before it was publicly announced. He used that information to manipulate land acquisitions, including orchestrating the death of Marcus Hale to seize property in the railway's path. Maxwell studied the papers, his expression unreadable. He read the survey, the letter from Garrett, the financial records. "Where did you get these?" "Crow's office." "You stole them?" "We borrowed them. Temporarily." Maxwell almost smiled. "That's theft, regardless of how you phrase it." "Would you prefer we left evidence of murder in a criminal's possession?" Evelyn asked. Maxwell looked at her. "You're Marcus Hale's intended bride. I heard about that situation." "Then you know I have a stake in this." "You have no legal standing. Hale's estate belongs to his creditors, not his mail-order bride." The dismissal in his tone made Evelyn's anger flare. "Then maybe you should care because it's right, not because of legal standing." Maxwell's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "I've heard that before." The governor gathered the papers. "These documents suggest insider trading and possible conspiracy to commit murder, but they're not conclusive. A good lawyer could challenge every interpretation. So you won't help us," Reed said flatly. "I didn't say that." Maxwell turned to his clerk. "Bring me the territorial surveyor's report on the railway route, and send a telegram to the federal marshal in Denver. Tell him I need assistance with a possible corruption case." The clerk hurried off. Maxwell turned back to them. "I'm going to investigate this. If Crow's involved in the things you're suggesting, he'll face consequences. But you need to understand, he's powerful, connected, and ruthless. Accusing him publicly without ironclad proof will get you killed." "What do you suggest?" Evelyn asked. "Stay in Santa Fe. Low profile. I'll have deputies watching you, both for your protection and to make sure you don't disappear. Give me 1 week to gather evidence and build a case. If I can corroborate what's in these documents, I'll move against Crow officially. And if you can't, then you'll need to accept that some battles can't be won." It wasn't the answer Evelyn wanted, but it was better than nothing. 1 week, she agreed. Maxwell nodded. "My clerk will arrange lodging. And Miss Hart? Get that ankle looked at. You're no good to anyone if you can't walk." They spent the next week in a small hotel near the plaza, waiting. The governor's office sent a doctor who confirmed the ankle wasn't broken, just severely sprained. He wrapped it properly and told Evelyn to stay off it for 2 weeks. She lasted 3 days before cabin fever drove her outside, hobbling on a cane the doctor had left. Reed stayed with her, restless and watchful. They barely spoke, the tension of waiting making conversation difficult. On the 4th day, news arrived that shook the territory. The federal marshal from Denver had arrived in Santa Fe and immediately traveled to Crow's ranch with a warrant. They'd seized documents, arrested 2 of Crow's men, and brought Crow himself in for questioning. "It's working," Evelyn breathed when Reed told her. "Maybe. Or maybe Crow's lawyers will bury it." "You're never optimistic, are you?" "Optimism's gotten more people killed than honesty." On the 6th day, Governor Maxwell summoned them to his office. "We found corroborating evidence," he said without preamble. "Multiple instances of fraud, bribery of local officials, and falsified land surveys. The federal marshal is building a case for conspiracy to commit murder based on the letter you found and testimony from Crow's men who decided cooperating was better than hanging." "So you got him," Reed said. "We've got enough to charge him. Conviction's another matter, but his land holdings are frozen pending investigation, which means he can't buy Marcus Hale's property at auction. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. What happens to the ranch? That's between you and the bank. My concern is Crow's criminal activity, not estate settlements. But if Crow was manipulating debt records, we're looking into that. If we find evidence of fraud in Hale's financial records, the debts might be disputed. But I can't promise anything. It was more than they'd had a week ago. Thank you, Evelyn said. Maxwell studied her. You took a hell of a risk coming here. Not many people would have pushed this hard. Not many people had a reason to. Fair enough. You're free to return to Silver Ridge. We'll contact you if we need testimony. They left Santa Fe the next morning, riding back through familiar landscape that felt different now, changed by what they'd done and what might come next. What if the bank still forecloses? Evelyn asked. Then we deal with it. But at least Crow won't be the one profiting. Is that enough? Reed was quiet for a long moment. A week ago, I would have said no. Now, I don't know. Sometimes stopping something bad is all you can do. They reached the ranch at sunset. Jesse and Tomas were mending fence near the house and looked up as they approached. You're alive, Jesse said. That's better than expected. Barely, Reed replied. Inside, over coffee and the remains of a stew Jesse had made, they explained everything. The break-in, the evidence, the governor's investigation, Crow's arrest. Jesse whistled low. You two got more nerve than sense. That's been established, Evelyn said. What happens now? We wait. See if this bank's willing to renegotiate Marcus's debts. See if the railway route gets announced. See if any of this was worth it. And if it wasn't? Evelyn looked around the kitchen, the worn table, the stove she'd learned to manage, the window that overlooked land she'd chosen to fight for. Then at least we tried. Jesse raised his cup. I'll drink to that. They did, the four of them sitting in the lamplight, tired and uncertain but still here, still fighting. Outside, the frontier stretched endlessly in all directions, full of danger and possibility, hardship and freedom, loss and the stubborn hope that tomorrow might be better than today. Evelyn thought about Boston, about the life she'd left behind. It felt like another world now, one she barely recognized. This place had changed her, made her harder and stronger and more herself than she'd ever been. Whatever came next, she'd face it the way she'd faced everything since arriving in New Mexico territory, without flinching. The waiting was worse than the danger had been. 3 days after returning from Santa Fe, Evelyn stood at the kitchen window watching storm clouds gather over the mesas. Her ankle still ached when she put weight on it, but the swelling had gone down enough that she could work without the cane. Small victories in a war that wasn't over yet. Behind her, Reed was going through Marcus's financial records for the third time, looking for anything that might support their case if the governor's investigation found fraud in the debt calculations. This don't add up, he said suddenly. Evelyn turned. What doesn't? Marcus borrowed $3,000 from the bank 2 years ago. According to these ledgers, he made regular payments, not enough to cover principal, but enough to keep interest from compounding too badly. But look at this. He pushed a bank statement across the table. 6 months ago, the balance jumped by $800. No explanation, no new loan, just appeared. Could it be a mistake? Banks don't make mistakes that cost them money. They make mistakes that cost you money. Evelyn sat down and studied the numbers. Reed was right. The increase didn't match any transaction in Marcus's records. You think the bank added it fraudulently? I think someone did. Question is whether it was the bank or someone with access to the accounts. Crow? He's got the connections. And if he was planning to force a sale through foreclosure, inflating the debt would make that happen faster. Evelyn felt anger rise in her chest, the now familiar burn of injustice. How do we prove it? We take this to the governor's investigators. Let them dig into the bank's records. What if the bank's in on it? Then we've got bigger problems than one fraudulent debt. The storm broke that afternoon, rain hammering the roof, lightning cracking across the sky. Evelyn and Jesse worked to secure the horses while Reed and Tomas checked the barn for leaks. By the time they finished, they were soaked through and shivering. Inside, Evelyn built up the fire while Jesse made coffee. The four of them sat around the stove, steam rising from their clothes. This keeps up, we'll lose the north pasture to flooding, Jesse said. Creek's already high. We'll check it tomorrow if the rain lets up, Reed replied. Right now, there's nothing we can do. Tomas said something in Spanish, gesturing toward the window. Jesse translated. He says the storm feels wrong, like it's bringing trouble. Storms don't bring trouble, Reed said. They just make existing trouble harder to handle. But Evelyn understood what Tomas meant. There was a tension in the air that had nothing to do with weather, a sense of something coming that they couldn't see yet but could feel in their bones. The rain continued through the night. Evelyn lay awake listening to it drum against the roof, water running in streams off the eaves. Somewhere in the darkness, a shutter had come loose and was banging rhythmically against the house. She got up and dressed, intending to secure it before the noise drove her insane. In the main room, Reed was already awake, sitting at the table with a lamp burning low. Can't sleep either? She asked. Not with that damn shutter. I was going to fix it. In this weather, you'll break your neck. Then I'll break it productively. Reed stood. I'll do it. You stay inside. I'm not helpless? Didn't say you were. But your ankle's still healing, and I'd rather not explain to the governor why his star witness fell off a ladder in a thunderstorm. Evelyn wanted to argue, but he was already pulling on his coat and heading for the door. She watched through the window as he climbed up to secure the shutter, rain pouring down, lightning illuminating him in brief, stark flashes. When he came back inside, dripping water across the floor, she handed him a towel. Thank you. Don't mention it. He dried his face and hair. You want coffee? At this hour? Better than sitting in the dark waiting for morning. They made coffee and sat at the table, the lamp casting shadows that danced with each flicker of the flame. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said. Reed nodded. What did you do before this? Before you came to work for Marcus? Ranch work mostly. Started when I was 14, worked my way up from mucking stalls to managing cattle operations. Did a stint as a trail boss driving herds north. That's where I learned most men will quit the moment things get hard. But you didn't. Couldn't afford to. No family, no education beyond basic reading and arithmetic. Work was all I had. No family at all? Reed's expression closed slightly. Had a brother once, younger. He died when I was 16. I'm sorry. Long time ago. But Evelyn could hear the weight of it in his voice. The kind of loss that doesn't diminish with years, just gets incorporated into who you become. What about you? Reed asked. You mentioned your parents died, but how'd you end up with your aunt? They died within a week of each other. Fever swept through Boston one winter, took half the neighborhood. I was 12. My aunt was my mother's sister, unmarried, bitter about it, and suddenly stuck with a child she didn't want. She treat you badly? Not in ways you could point to. She fed me, clothed me, kept a roof over my head, but she never let me forget I was an obligation. Every dress, every meal, every bit of schooling was a debt I owed. When I turned 21 and could legally make my own decisions, she made it clear I had two options: marry someone she approved of or leave. So you left. So I gambled on a stranger's letters and ended up here. You regret it? Evelyn considered the question honestly. No. Even if everything falls apart, even if we lose the ranch, and I end up scrubbing floors in Silver Ridge, I don't regret it. Because for the first time in my life, I'm the one making the choices. Reed looked at her across the table, lamplight catching the planes of his face. You're tougher than Marcus probably realized. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Sounds like a compliment. Take it however you want. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. There was something comforting about Reed's bluntness, the way he said what he meant without decoration or pretense. The rain finally stopped near dawn. They went outside to assess damage, a section of fence down, part of the barn roof leaking, the north pasture flooded just as Jesse had predicted. It would take days to repair everything, and they didn't have days. The bank's auction was scheduled for next week, but they worked anyway. What else was there to do? 2 days later, a rider arrived from Santa Fe. He was young, official-looking, with territorial marshal papers in his saddlebag. I'm looking for Dawson Reed and Evelyn Hart. You found them, Reed said. The rider dismounted and pulled out a document. Governor Maxwell sends his compliments. The investigation into Silas Crow has uncovered significant evidence of fraud, including falsified land surveys, bribery of local officials, and manipulation of financial records at the Silver Ridge Bank. Evelyn's heart kicked. The bank was involved? The bank president was receiving payments from Crow in exchange for adjusting debt records on properties Crow wanted to acquire. Your late fiance's ranch was one of several affected. So the debt is fraudulent? Partially. The original loan was legitimate, but approximately $800 was added without authorization. That amount has been removed from the outstanding balance, and the bank is being required to recalculate interest based on the correct figures. Reed stepped forward. What's the new total? The writer consulted his papers. $2,100. Still substantial, but more manageable than the previous amount. When's the auction? It's been postponed pending resolution of the fraud investigation. The property can't be sold while ownership is disputed. How long will that take? Weeks, possibly months. Evelyn felt something between relief and frustration. They'd won a reprieve, but not a resolution. The sword was still hanging, just suspended higher. What about Crow? Reed asked. He's being held in Santa Fe awaiting trial. The territorial court is fast-tracking the case given the scope of the fraud. He'll likely face significant prison time if convicted. If? Rich men have good lawyers, but the evidence is strong. The writer left after delivering additional paperwork, official notices, court documents, revised debt statements. Reed spread them across the table, studying each one. $2,100, he said quietly. Still more money than we've got. But less than before. That's something. Something ain't enough. Evelyn sat down, exhaustion settling over her. They'd fought so hard, risked so much, and they were still losing, just slower. There has to be a way, she said. If there is, I don't see it. What if we sell part of the land? If the railway route goes through here like we think, someone might buy acreage at a premium. Railway route's not public yet. Anyone buying now would lowball the price, and we'd lose value when the route's announced. Then we wait for the announcement. And hope the bank gives us time? They've already postponed once. They won't wait forever. Evelyn pressed her palms against her eyes, frustration building. So what do we do? Reed didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. We could walk away. What? Walk away. Let the bank take the property. Let it sort itself out. You've got no legal obligation here. Marcus is dead. The engagement's void, and you don't owe this place anything. I owe myself. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. Evelyn dropped her hands and looked at him. I stayed here because I chose to. I fought for this place because it became mine in every way that matters. Walking away now would mean all of it was for nothing. It wouldn't be for nothing. We stopped Crow. That counts for something. But not enough. They sat in heavy silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down. Finally, Reed said, If you're staying, I'm staying. We'll figure something out. You don't have to do that. I know. Then why? Reed met her eyes. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Marcus's ranch and started being about something else. And I'm not walking away from that either. The words hung between them, loaded with meanings neither of them was quite ready to name. The next week crawled past. They worked the ranch, repaired storm damage, maintained routines that felt increasingly fragile. Jesse and Tomas asked no questions, but Evelyn caught them exchanging looks that said they understood the situation better than anyone gave them credit for. On the 8th day, news arrived that changed everything. The territorial governor had officially announced the railway route. It would run from Silver Ridge northeast to Raton, cutting directly through the northern section of what had been Marcus's property, the exact area marked on the survey they'd found in Crow's office. Land values in the affected area tripled overnight. This is it, Evelyn said, staring at the official route map Jesse had brought from town. This is how we save the ranch. Reed studied the map, his expression cautious. Maybe, if we can sell part of the land before the bank forecloses. How much would we need to sell? Depends on the price. Railways bring in speculators, and speculators drive prices up, but we'd need to sell fast before the bank loses patience. Then we find a buyer today. They rode into Silver Ridge that afternoon. The town was buzzing with railway news. Men clustered outside the saloon arguing about property values, women gossiping at the general store about what the railway would mean for the territory, children running through the streets with the manic energy that comes from adult excitement. Reed headed for the land office while Evelyn went to the bank. She needed to understand exactly how much time they had and what terms might be negotiable. The bank president was a thin man named Carver, with nervous hands and the haunted look of someone who'd barely avoided criminal charges. He recognized Evelyn immediately. "Miss Hart, I heard you were instrumental in uncovering the fraud." "Mr. Carver," she kept her voice level, "I'm here about Marcus Hale's estate. The debt's been recalculated as per the territorial marshal's instructions, $2,100. I'm aware. I want to know how much time we have to settle it." Carver shuffled papers on his desk. "The bank has been more than patient, Miss Hart. The original loan is 2 years old and we've already postponed one auction. Because you were complicit in fraud." Carver's face reddened. "That's been resolved." "Has it? Because from where I'm standing, the bank facilitated Silas Crow's criminal activity and nearly cost me everything. The least you can do is give me time to make this right. I've been authorized to offer 30 days. After that, the property goes to auction regardless of circumstances." 30 days. It wasn't much, but it was something. "I'll need that in writing." "Of course." Carver pulled out a form and began writing. "Miss Hart, I hope you understand my position. I was following orders from my predecessor, who's now facing criminal charges. The territorial bank examiner is reviewing all our accounts. I'm trying to run things honestly going forward. Then run them honestly. Give people a fair chance instead of working with men like Crow to steal their land." "I will. I am." He handed her the form. 30 days. After that, my hands are tied." Evelyn took the paper and left. Outside, Reed was waiting with news. "Found 3 potential buyers. 2 are speculators from Denver. One's a local rancher looking to expand. All of them are interested in railway-adjacent land." "How much are they offering?" "Depends on acreage. The speculators are offering premium prices but want large parcels. The rancher's offering less but would buy smaller sections." "How much do we need to keep the ranch viable?" Reed pulled out Marcus's survey map. "The railway cuts through the northwest corner. We could sell 100 acres along the route, keep the rest intact. That'd be enough for cattle operations, enough to build on." "And would 100 acres bring $2,000? At current speculation prices?" "Probably 3,000. Relief flooded through Evelyn. "Then we do it. We sell, we pay the bank, and we keep the rest." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because you don't legally own the property. Marcus's estate is in probate, and you're not his wife or heir. You can't sell land that's not yours." The relief evaporated, replaced by cold frustration. "So what do we do?" "We get the estate executor to authorize the sale. That's the judge in Silver Ridge, same one who'd oversee the auction." "Will he help us?" "Depends on whether he's honest or whether Crow's money reached him too." They found Judge Harlan in his office above the general store, a tired-looking man in his 60s with ink-stained fingers and skeptical eyes. "You want to sell Marcus Hale's land to pay his debts," he said after they explained the situation. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "And you have buyers willing to pay fair market value?" "Above market value, given the railway route." Harlan leaned back in his chair. "Miss Hart, you have no legal standing in this matter. You're not Marcus Hale's widow, not his family, not named in any will. Why should I authorize you to make decisions about his estate?" "Because I'm the only one trying to preserve it instead of letting it be auctioned off for nothing. The auction would generate funds to pay creditors. That's the legal process." "The legal process was corrupted by Silas Crow," Reed said. "We've got proof the debt was artificially inflated. Seems like the least the law could do is let us fix what Crow broke." Harlan studied them both. "You two make an interesting pair. A mail-order bride with no legal claim and a ranch foreman with no financial stake. Why do you care so much?" "Because it's right," Evelyn said. "And because sometimes right matters more than legal." "That's a dangerous philosophy." "It's the only one that makes sense when the law's been bought." Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a form and began writing. "I'm authorizing a limited power of attorney for the purpose of selling specified acreage to settle estate debts. This doesn't make you the owner, Miss Hart. It makes you the executor's agent. You sell the land, pay the bank, and anything remaining goes into the estate for proper distribution. Understood?" "Yes." "And if you try to profit from this or manipulate the sale in any way, I'll have you arrested for fraud. Clear?" "Crystal." Harlan signed the form and handed it over. 30 days. That's all the time I can give you. After that, this authorization expires and the property goes to auction. They left with the paperwork and rode straight to the speculator's hotel. By evening, they'd negotiated a sale, 120 acres along the railway route for $3,200. The buyers would pay half up front, half upon completion of the survey and title transfer. It was more money than Evelyn had ever seen, more than she'd imagined possible. They deposited $1,600 with the bank the next morning, with a signed contract promising the remainder within 2 weeks. Carver looked stunned as he processed the payment. "This settles the debt with funds remaining for estate taxes," he said. "Does that mean the ranch is clear?" "Pending completion of the sale, yes. The property's no longer under foreclosure threat." Evelyn felt something break open in her chest. Relief so intense it was almost painful. They'd done it. Against every odd, against every obstacle, they'd saved the ranch. Outside, Reed was waiting on the porch. She walked up to him, still holding the receipt. "It's done. The debt's settled." Reed took the paper, read it, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "You did it." "We did it. You started it. I just followed along." "That's not how I remember it." Reed almost smiled. Memory's unreliable. They rode back to the ranch in silence, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling over them. When they arrived, Jesse and Tomas were waiting. "Well?" Jesse asked. "Ranch is saved," Reed said. "Debts paid, property's clear." Jesse let out a long breath. "Hell of a thing." Tomas grinned and said something rapid in Spanish. Jesse translated. "He says you two are either blessed or crazy, and he's not sure which." "Probably both," Evelyn said. That night, they celebrated with whiskey Jesse had been saving and a dinner Evelyn cooked that was only slightly burned. They sat around the table, exhausted and relieved, talking about the future for the first time without the shadow of foreclosure hanging over them. "What happens now?" Jesse asked. "We finish the sale, transfer the title, and figure out how to actually run this place," Reed said. "You planning to stay?" Jesse asked Evelyn. "Where else would I go? Back east. Respectable life, proper society." "I'm done with respectable. It never fit me anyway." Jesse raised his glass. "Then here's to improper women and the fools who follow them." They drank to that. Later, after Jesse and Tomas had gone to the bunkhouse, Evelyn and Reed sat on the porch watching stars emerge. The night was cool and clear, the kind of evening that felt like a reward after a storm. "What are you thinking about?" Reed asked. "How strange it is. 2 months ago I didn't know this place existed. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Frontier has a way of doing that. It either breaks you or makes you belong. "Which one happened to you?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "Both, probably. It broke what I was and made me into something else. Can't say if that's better or worse, just different." "I think it's better," Evelyn said. "Why?" "Because broken things that heal are stronger than things that were never tested." Reed looked at her, and in the starlight his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, everything I've been through was just pain with no purpose. Maybe pain doesn't need purpose. Maybe it just is. That's bleak. That's honest." Evelyn turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something?" "Always? Why did you really help me? Not the reasons you've given before, but the real one." Reed was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "Because when you showed up here, stubborn and determined and refusing to quit, even when quitting was the smart choice, you reminded me why I came west in the first place. I came looking for something that mattered, something worth fighting for. And then I got tired of fighting and just started surviving. You made me remember the difference." "Is that all?" "No." Reed met her eyes. "But the rest isn't something I know how to say." Evelyn's heart was beating too fast, the air between them charged with something she couldn't quite name. "Try." Before Reed could answer, a gunshot cracked through the night. They were on their feet instantly, Reed's hand on his revolver. Another shot, closer this time. "The barn," Reed said, already moving. They ran across the yard. The barn door was open, and inside Jesse stood with a rifle pointed at a figure on the ground. Found him sneaking around, Jesse said. Tried to run when I challenged him. Reed lit a lamp. The man on the ground was young, maybe 20, with scared eyes and shaking hands. Who are you? Reed demanded. Nobody. I didn't mean, who sent you? Nobody sent me. I was looking for work, saw the barn, thought maybe I could sleep here without bothering anyone. Reed grabbed the man's collar and hauled him to his feet. Try again, and this time don't lie. The man's resolve crumbled. Crow sent me. Before they arrested him. He said to watch the place, report back if anyone left or if anything changed. But then he got arrested and I didn't know what to do, so I kept watching. How long? 3 weeks, maybe. I'm sorry. I didn't mean any harm. Reed shoved him away in disgust. Get out. And if I see you near this property again, I won't be as gentle as Jesse. The man scrambled to his feet and ran into the darkness. They heard him crash through the scrub, then silence. Think there's others? Jesse asked. Probably not. Crow's in jail, his operations collapsed. This one was probably just too scared to run. But Evelyn felt cold despite the warm night. They'd won, but the victory was fragile. Crow's shadow still touched them, would probably continue touching them until the trial was over and he was locked away permanently. We need to be more careful, she said. Agreed. I'll set up watches, make sure we're not caught by surprise again. They spent the rest of the night on alert, but no one else came. By morning, the incident felt distant, almost unreal. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The survey was completed, the title transfer processed, and the remaining payment deposited. The speculators took possession of their acreage and immediately began marking it for development. A rail station, warehouses, maybe a whole new town if the railway brought enough traffic. The ranch, reduced but solvent, was officially cleared of debt. Judge Harlan signed the final papers and handed them to Evelyn. Legally, this still belongs to Marcus Hale's estate, he said, but since there's no living heirs and the debts are settled, the property will eventually transfer to whoever has the strongest claim. Who would that be? Good question. Normally it'd go to the territory for public auction, but given your role in preserving the estate's value, you might petition for consideration. It's unusual, but these are unusual circumstances. What are my chances? Better than they were. You've demonstrated commitment and capability. The law tends to favor people who improve property rather than abandon it. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. Reed was waiting outside. What'd he say? That I might be able to claim the property legally, eventually. How long is eventually? He didn't specify. Months, probably, maybe longer. You willing to wait? Evelyn looked out at the ranch, the house she'd learned to maintain, the land she'd fought for, the future she'd chosen. As long as it takes. Then I guess we're in this together. Is that what we are? Together? Reed's expression shifted, something vulnerable passing across his face. I'd like to think so, if you're interested. Evelyn felt her heart kick. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, maybe longer, neither of them willing to name what was growing between them. I'm interested, she said quietly. Reed stepped closer. You sure? Because I'm not Marcus Hale. I can't promise you security or stability or any of the things you came west looking for. I didn't come west looking for security. I came looking for choice. And I choose this. I choose you. Reed kissed her then, careful and deliberate. And Evelyn kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside. Relief and fear and hope and want all tangled together. When they broke apart, Reed rested his forehead against hers. This is probably a terrible idea. Most of my ideas are terrible. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Reed laughed, the sound low and genuine. Fair enough. They walked back to the house hand in hand, the gesture simple but weighted with meaning. Inside, Jesse took one look at them and grinned. About damn time. Don't start, Reed said. I'm not starting anything, just observing that you two have been circling each other like nervous horses for weeks. That's starting. Fine, I'll shut up, but I better be invited to the wedding. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. That's not yet, Jesse said, still grinning. But mark my words, it's coming. He left before either of them could argue, and Evelyn found herself laughing despite the embarrassment. "He's impossible," she said. "He's not wrong, though." Evelyn looked at Reed. "About what?" "About this going somewhere. If you want it to." "I want it to. Then we'll figure out the details as we go." It was, Evelyn thought, the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. Not because it was flowery or dramatic, but because it was real. A promise built on honesty rather than fantasy. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. The ranch work continued, cattle to manage, fences to repair, land to maintain. But there was a lightness to it now, a sense of purpose that hadn't existed when every day was spent fighting foreclosure. Evelyn learned to rope and brand, to read weather patterns, to understand the rhythms of livestock and land. Reed taught her patiently, and when she made mistakes, and she made plenty, he corrected her without judgment. They worked side by side, and in the evenings they sat on the porch talking about the future. Real plans, not desperate schemes. How to expand the herd, whether to plant crops, what improvements the house needed. Jesse and Tomas watched them with amused tolerance, occasionally offering advice, but mostly staying out of the way. "You two are disgustingly domestic," Jesse said one evening. "Jealous?" Reed asked. "Of the paperwork and early mornings? No thanks. But I'm happy for you both. This place needs people who care about it." "You care about it." "I care about having a job. That's different than what you two have." And he was right. What Evelyn and Reed had built went beyond employment or even partnership. It was belonging, the kind that gets forged through shared struggle and mutual respect. 1 month after they'd saved the ranch, news arrived that Silas Crow had been convicted on multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison, his assets seized and auctioned to compensate victims of his schemes. "It's over," Evelyn said, reading the telegram from Governor Maxwell. "That chapter is," Reed replied, "but there's a lot of chapters left to write." He was right. The immediate danger had passed, but the future was still uncertain. The ranch was theirs to manage, but not to own, not yet. The legal process would take time, and there were no guarantees. But Evelyn had learned that certainty was overrated. What mattered was commitment, and she was committed to this place and this man with an intensity that surprised her. That night, Reed found her in the small room that had been Marcus's, going through the last of his papers. "What are you looking for?" "I don't know. Closure, maybe. Understanding of who he was." Reed sat on the edge of the bed. "Does it matter?" "Shouldn't it? He brought me here. Without him, none of this would have happened." "Maybe. Or maybe you would have found another way west, another reason to leave Boston. Marcus was the catalyst, but you're the one who made choices." Evelyn set down the papers. "I used to think about what it would have been like if he'd lived. Whether we would have been happy, whether this would have felt like home with him instead of you. And I can't imagine it. This version, the one where everything went wrong and we had to fight for every inch, feels like the only version that makes sense." Reed reached for her hand. "Maybe that's because it's the version where you got to choose, not just accept what was given. Is that what you think happened? I think you came here expecting one life and built a completely different one. And somehow, the one you built is better than the one you planned." Evelyn leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "I love you. I don't know if that's too soon to say, but it's true." Reed's arm came around her shoulders. "It's not too soon, and I love you too. Have for a while, just didn't know how to say it." They sat like that for a long time, the lamp burning low, the night settling around them. Outside, the frontier stretched endlessly, full of danger and possibility. But inside this small room, in this moment, everything they needed was right here. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new fights to win. But tonight, they could rest in the knowledge that they'd survived the worst and come out stronger. The ranch was theirs, not on paper yet, but in every way that mattered. They'd defended it, preserved it, and made it into something worth keeping. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Crow's conviction. Evelyn was hanging laundry when Jesse rode up from town with the yellow envelope, his expression unreadable. "From the territorial court," he said, handing it over. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened it. Reed came out of the barn, wiping grease from his hands, and stood beside her as she read. "They're expediting the estate settlement," she said quietly. "Judge wants us in Silver Ridge next week to finalize the property transfer." "That's good news," Jesse said. "Maybe." Reed's voice was cautious. "Depends on who they decide has claim to the property." Evelyn folded the telegram carefully. She'd known this was coming, had spent weeks preparing for it, but now that the moment was here, fear twisted in her stomach. Everything they'd built could still be taken away by a judge's decision. "We'll deal with it," she said, more to convince herself than anyone else. The week passed too quickly. Evelyn found herself memorizing details: the way morning light hit the kitchen window, the sound of horses in the corral, the view from the porch at sunset, as if cataloging these things would somehow keep them safe. Reed noticed, though he didn't comment. Instead, he worked beside her quietly, his presence steady and reassuring even when words felt inadequate. The night before they were scheduled to appear in court, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She got up and found Reed on the porch, staring out at the dark landscape. "You worried?" she asked. "Some." "About the hearing?" "About what happens if it goes wrong. I've got enough saved to get by for a while, find work somewhere else. But you—" "I'll manage. I always do." Reed turned to look at her. "That's not what I meant. I'm worried about what losing this place would do to you. You've put everything into it." "So have you." "It's different. I chose to help you. You chose to build a life here. That's a bigger investment." Evelyn leaned against the porch rail. "If we lose, we'll figure something out. Maybe buy land somewhere else, start over." "With what money?" "I don't know, but I've done impossible things before. I can do them again." Reed reached for her hand. "You shouldn't have to." "Neither should you, but here we are." They stood in the darkness, holding onto each other and the fragile hope that tomorrow wouldn't destroy everything they'd fought for. Judge Harlan's courtroom was small and stuffy, with narrow windows that let in minimal light. A handful of people sat in the gallery, curious townspeople, a clerk, and surprisingly, Governor Maxwell himself. Evelyn and Reed sat at one table while a lawyer representing the territorial bank sat at another. The banker, Carver, was conspicuously absent. Judge Harlan entered and took his seat. "We're here to settle the matter of Marcus Hale's estate, specifically the disposition of his ranch property. I've reviewed all submitted documents, including testimony regarding Miss Hart's role in preserving the estate's value and exposing fraud that would have resulted in significant financial loss." He paused, shuffling papers. "This is an unusual situation. Miss Hart has no traditional claim. She's not family, not a legal spouse, not named in any will. However, her actions directly saved the property from foreclosure and illegal seizure." Evelyn's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must hear it. "The bank's position," Harlan continued, "is that the property should be auctioned with proceeds going to settle any remaining estate obligations and the remainder going to the territorial government." "Your Honor," the bank's lawyer stood, "my client simply requests that legal protocol be followed. While we appreciate Miss Hart's efforts, sentiment cannot override established law." "I'm aware of the law, Counselor. Sit down." The lawyer sat. Harlan turned to Evelyn. "Miss Hart, you've petitioned for the right to purchase the property at fair market value using funds currently held in the estate account. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Evelyn's voice was steadier than she felt. "After the land sale, there's approximately $900 remaining. I'd like to use that toward purchasing the ranch, with the understanding I'd pay the remainder over time." "And what's your proposed purchase price?" $1,500 based on the current assessed value minus the acreage already sold. That's substantially below market rate, given the railway development. The railway only affects the land we already sold. The remaining property is grazing land with limited commercial value. Harlan looked at the bank's lawyer. "Your client's assessment? We believe the property could fetch $2,000 at auction, possibly more. But you're willing to wait months for an auction and risk getting less?" The lawyer hesitated. "We prefer certainty, Your Honor." "I'm sure you would. Unfortunately, this situation doesn't offer much certainty for anyone." Harlan leaned back. "Governor Maxwell, you asked to provide testimony. The floor is yours." Maxwell stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, I followed Miss Hart's case closely. She exposed significant corruption that extended well beyond one property dispute. Without her persistence, Silas Crow would still be manipulating land deals throughout the territory. The law should recognize that preservation of justice sometimes requires flexibility. Are you suggesting I ignore legal precedent? I'm suggesting that precedent was written without considering situations like this. A woman who saves a property from criminal seizure shouldn't be penalized for lacking traditional standing. And if I set that precedent, I'll have every squatter and claim jumper in the territory arguing they deserve special consideration. Then make your ruling narrow. This case, these circumstances, this person. Don't create broad precedent, just recognize exceptional facts. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Evelyn. Stand up, Miss Hart. She stood, legs unsteady. You came to this territory under false premises. Your intended husband was dead before you arrived. You had every reason and right to return east. Instead, you stayed, worked, and fought for property that wasn't legally yours. Why? Evelyn took a breath. Because I chose it, Your Honor. For the first time in my life, I chose something that mattered, and I wasn't willing to give up just because it got hard. That choice defines me more than any law or custom. And if I rule against you, then I'll accept it, but I won't regret fighting. Harlan nodded slowly. The law is designed to create order and predictability, but it's also supposed to serve justice, and sometimes those goals conflict. In this case, legal precedent suggests the property should be auctioned, but justice suggests the person who saved it should benefit from that effort. He paused, and the silence stretched unbearably. I'm ruling in favor of Miss Hart's petition. She's authorized to purchase the property for $1,500, with $900 applied from estate funds, and the remaining $600 to be paid within 1 year at standard interest rates. If she defaults, the property reverts to territorial control. But assuming she meets those obligations, full title will transfer to her name. Evelyn felt her knees go weak. Reed's hand found hers under the table, gripping tight. Thank you, Your Honor, she managed. Don't thank me yet. You've got a year to come up with $600 plus interest. That's not easy money, especially running a small ranch operation. I'll manage. I believe you will. Court's adjourned. Outside, Evelyn leaned against the courthouse wall, shaking. Reed stood close, one hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. No, this one was all you. Governor Maxwell approached, extending his hand. Congratulations, Miss Hart. You've set an interesting precedent. I hope I haven't caused you trouble. On the contrary, you've reminded me why I took this job. Justice isn't always neat, but it's worth fighting for. He left, and Jesse appeared from wherever he'd been waiting. Heard the news. Figured you could use a drink. They found a quiet corner in the saloon where Jesse ordered whiskey and raised his glass. To the stubbornest woman in New Mexico territory. I'll drink to that, Reed said. Evelyn felt tears threaten and blinked them back. I can't believe it's real. It's real, Reed assured her. You own the ranch. All of it. I own $600 of debt and a year to pay it off. Details. Pretty significant details. Jesse refilled their glasses. You'll figure it out. You always do. Besides, you got help now. What kind of help? The kind that comes from people who believe in what you're doing. Word spreading about what you did, how you stood up to Crow. That means something out here. Evelyn wasn't sure she believed him, but she appreciated the sentiment. They rode back to the ranch that evening, arriving after dark. Tomas had lit lamps in the house, and the warm glow spilling from the windows made Evelyn's chest ache with something she could only describe as coming home. Inside, she looked around the kitchen, the scarred table where they'd planned their raid on Crow's office, the stove she'd learned to manage, the shelves holding mismatched dishes and supplies, everything worn and imperfect and absolutely hers. What are you thinking? Reed asked. That I need to figure out how to make $600 in 12 months. We'll expand the herd. Cattle prices are rising with the railway coming. We sell smart. We should clear enough. That's optimistic. I'm trying something new. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. How's it feel? Uncomfortable. But maybe that's good. The next morning, they started planning in earnest. Reed calculated how many head of cattle they could reasonably add, what grazing land could support, when to sell for maximum profit. Evelyn reviewed their expenses, looking for cuts they could make without compromising the operation. We're running tight margins, she said after 3 hours of calculations. Most ranches do. And if something goes wrong, Drought, disease, market collapse? Then we adapt. That's frontier life. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's survivable. Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into the work. Reed negotiated the purchase of 20 additional head of cattle from a rancher selling off stock before winter. Jesse and Tomas built additional corral space and repaired sections of fence that had been neglected during the legal battles. Evelyn managed the household budget with fierce attention to detail, tracking every dollar spent and saved. She sold eggs in town, took in mending work from neighbors, found small ways to generate additional income. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was purposeful. Every dollar earned was a dollar closer to owning the ranch outright. 2 months after the court ruling, a stranger arrived at the ranch. He was well-dressed, clearly not a local, and introduced himself as Thomas Brennan from the Southwest Railway Development Company. "I'm here to discuss a business proposition," he said. Reed crossed his arms. "We're not selling. I'm not here to buy. I'm here to offer a contract." They invited him inside, wary but curious. Brennan spread documents across the kitchen table. "The railway needs reliable suppliers for materials and labor. We're looking to contract with local operations, ranches, timber operations, quarries. Your property is well positioned, and I understand you're experienced operators." "What kind of contract?" Evelyn asked. "Beef cattle, primarily. We've got crews working on the line who need feeding. We'd purchase at guaranteed prices, monthly deliveries. It's steady income for the duration of the construction, which we estimate at 18 months. Reed studied the papers. "These prices are fair, almost too fair. We found that treating suppliers well creates better relationships. And Governor Maxwell specifically recommended your operation." Evelyn glanced at Reed. Maxwell's influence was still helping them, apparently. "What's the catch?" Reed asked. "No catch. Just reliable delivery on schedule. Miss cattle shipments, break the contract, and we move to another supplier. Simple as that." They negotiated for an hour, hammering out details about quantities, delivery schedules, and quality standards. When Brennan left, they had a contract that would generate enough income to pay off the $600 debt within 6 months, with plenty left over for operations and improvements. "This feels too good to be true," Evelyn said. "Maxwell's making sure we survive. He wants his precedent to work out." "Is that wrong?" "No, just unusual. Most people don't get second chances, let alone help from territorial governors." "Maybe we earned it." Reed pulled her close. "Maybe we did." The railway contract changed everything. Suddenly, they had guaranteed income and the security to plan beyond mere survival. Evelyn paid down the debt aggressively, making large payments every month. By spring, they'd reduced it to $200. The ranch began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a home. They made improvements: new shingles on the barn roof, a proper chicken coop, a small vegetable garden that Evelyn tended with surprising success. Jesse and Tomas became permanent fixtures rather than temporary help. They built their own small cabin on the property, declaring the bunkhouse too drafty for year-round living. Life developed rhythms, cattle drives and spring roundups, town trips for supplies, evenings on the porch watching the sun drop behind the mesas. It was hard work, but it was their work, chosen and earned rather than inherited or gifted. One evening in late April, Reed found Evelyn sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing in particular. "You all right?" "I'm good. Just thinking." "About?" "How different everything is from what I expected. When I left Boston, I thought I was coming here to be someone's wife, to slot into a life someone else had built. And instead, I built my own life, became my own person. It's strange how loss can turn into gain." Reed sat beside her. "You miss him? Marcus?" Evelyn considered the question honestly. "I miss the idea of him, the security he represented, the certainty, but I don't miss him specifically because I never knew him. What I have now is better because it's real." "Even with all the struggle?" "Especially because of the struggle. Easy things don't mean much." Reed took her hand. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "About making this official, you and me." Evelyn's heart jumped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we've been running this ranch together for months, living in the same house, building a future side by side. Seems like we should make it formal." "Are you proposing?" "I'm trying to. Not doing it very well, apparently." Despite herself, Evelyn laughed. It's terrible, completely unromantic. Should I start over? No. It's perfect because it's honest. She squeezed his hand. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, assuming you were actually asking. I am. Will you? I just said yes. Right. Good. Reed looked relieved and slightly stunned, as if he hadn't expected her to agree. Did you think I'd say no? Considered it a possibility. Why would I say no? Because marrying me means staying here permanently. No going back east, no returning to civilization. This is it. Good. I don't want anything else. They sat in comfortable silence, the enormity of the commitment settling over them. It wasn't dramatic or theatrical, but it was real, a promise built on shared experience rather than romantic fantasy. Jesse's reaction the next morning was predictably smug. Told you it was coming. You're insufferable, Reed said. And accurate. When's the wedding? We haven't discussed it. Better discuss it soon. These things require planning. They decided on a simple ceremony in Silver Ridge, just family and close friends, which turned out to be more people than Evelyn expected. Townspeople who'd watched their fight against Crow, ranchers who respected their determination. Even Governor Maxwell sent his regards, though he couldn't attend. The wedding took place on a warm June morning in the small territorial courthouse. Evelyn wore a dress she'd made herself, simple and practical. Reed wore his cleanest shirt and looked uncomfortable in formal clothes. Judge Harlan performed the ceremony, his expression softer than during their court appearance. I've presided over hundreds of weddings, he said, after declaring them married. But this is the first one where I'm genuinely certain the couple understands what they're committing to. Is that a compliment? Evelyn asked. It's an observation. Most people marry on hope and assumption. You two are marrying with full knowledge of each other's flaws and strengths. That's rare. They celebrated with a small gathering at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, where she'd prepared an impressive meal and declared herself proud to have housed Evelyn during her first difficult days in the territory. You've come far, she said, refilling Evelyn's cup. Most girls in your situation would have given up. I'm stubborn. Stubborn's good. Keeps you alive out here. By evening, they rode back to the ranch. Their ranch now, officially and legally. The sun was setting as they arrived, painting the landscape in shades of gold and red. How does it feel? Reed asked. Being married? The same as yesterday, which I think is good. Why? Because we already knew what we were. The ceremony just made it official. They stood together on the porch, watching darkness settle over land they'd fought for and earned. In the distance, construction crews worked on the railway line, their campfires dotting the landscape like fallen stars. Think we'll make it? Evelyn asked. Long term? I think we've survived worse than whatever's coming. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. We're not guaranteed anything except another chance to try. That's more than most people get. Evelyn leaned against him, feeling the solid weight of his presence. He was right. There were no guarantees. The ranch could still fail. Markets could collapse. Drought could devastate their herd. 1,000 things could go wrong. But they'd face those things together the way they'd faced everything else. With determination and honesty and the stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting made sense. The frontier had tested her in ways Boston never could have. It had stripped away pretense and revealed what she was actually made of. Turned out she was made of tougher material than anyone, including herself, had realized. Marcus Hale had offered her a beginning, but she'd created the continuation. This life, this ranch, this marriage, all of it was hers. Chosen and built and defended with every resource she had. And that made all the difference. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm through the windows. Their home, earned through struggle and sacrifice. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely and completely theirs. Evelyn took Reed's hand and led him inside, closing the door on the darkness and whatever uncertainties tomorrow might bring. Right now, in this moment, they had everything they needed, each other and the land they'd chosen to call home. The final debt payment came due on a cold October morning, exactly 1 year after Judge Harlan's ruling. Evelyn counted out the money 3 times before sealing it in an envelope, $647, including interest. Every penny earned through cattle sales, railway contracts, and countless small economies that had defined their first year of marriage. Reed watched from the doorway, arms crossed. You look like you're sending off a child. This money represents everything we've worked for. I'm allowed to be nervous. We could ride into town together. Make sure it gets delivered proper. No, you're needed here. Jesse and Tomas can't move the herd to winter pasture alone. They managed before. That was before we doubled the size of the operation. I'll be fine. It's just a bank deposit. Reed stepped closer and pulled her into his arms. Last payment. After this, the ranch is fully yours. Ours. I know. Evelyn pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and soap and hard work. I'm scared something will go wrong at the last minute. Nothing's going wrong. We've done everything right, paid on time, met every obligation. This is just a formality. Famous last words. You want me to come with you? Evelyn pulled back and looked up at him. No, I need to do this myself, finish what I started. She rode into Silver Ridge alone, the envelope tucked safely in her jacket. The town had grown in the past year, new buildings springing up along the main road, a proper hotel replacing Mrs. Chen's boarding house, the railway station under construction at the edge of town, progress following the railroad like water following gravity. The bank was busier than she remembered, multiple clerks serving customers instead of just Carver at his lonely desk. He looked up when she entered, recognition crossing his face. Miss Hart. Mrs. Reed, I should say. Mr. Carver. Evelyn set the envelope on his desk. Final payment on the Hale estate debt. Carver opened the envelope and counted carefully, making notations in his ledger. $647. That settles the account in full. He stamped a document and handed it to her. Congratulations. The property is yours free and clear. Evelyn stared at the stamped paper, the official seal making everything real in a way it hadn't been before. That's it? That's it. Unless you want a parade. I'll pass on the parade. Carver almost smiled. You've done well, Mrs. Reed. Most people in your situation would have failed, but you made it work. We made it work. My husband, our hands, everyone who helped. Still, you're the one who started it. That counts for something. Evelyn folded the document carefully and tucked it in her jacket beside the now empty envelope. Walking out of the bank felt different than walking in. Lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. Outside, she stood on the boardwalk watching people move through their daily routines. A year ago, she'd been a stranger here, desperate and uncertain. Now she was part of this place, woven into its fabric through struggle and perseverance. Mrs. Reed! Evelyn turned to find Mrs. Chen approaching, older but no less sharp-eyed. I heard you were in town. Come have tea. I won't take no for an answer. They sat in Mrs. Chen's new establishment, a proper restaurant with tablecloths and a menu. She poured tea with the same efficient movements Evelyn remembered. You've done well, Mrs. Chen said. Better than I expected, and I expected you'd do all right. Thank you for everything. Those first nights here, I don't know what I would have done without your help. You would have managed. You're that type. Mrs. Chen sipped her tea. But I'm glad I could help. Too many girls come west chasing dreams and end up broken. You came west and built something real. It didn't feel real at the time, just desperate. Desperation and determination look similar from the outside. The difference is what you do after the first disaster. You kept going. That's what mattered. They talked for an hour, Mrs. Chen sharing gossip about the town's growth and the changes coming with the railway. When Evelyn finally left, the older woman pressed a package into her hands. For your table, you'll need nice things now that you're established. Inside was a set of linen napkins embroidered with simple flowers. The kind of thing Evelyn would never buy for herself, but treasured because someone thought she deserved them. She rode home as the sun dropped toward the horizon, the stamped document and the napkins both carefully stored in her saddlebag. The landscape was familiar now, every rise and draw, every twist of the trail. This was her land, her territory, her home in ways Boston had never been. At the ranch, Reed was waiting on the porch. He stood when she dismounted, his expression asking the question before his mouth could. It's done, Evelyn said, pulling out the stamped document. Paid in full. The ranch is ours. Reed took the paper and read it, then folded it and handed it back. Then I guess we should celebrate. How? Jesse's been threatening to cook something special if you pulled this off. Probably time to see if he can back up his bragging. Inside, Jessie had indeed prepared a feast: roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables from their garden, and a pie made with preserved fruit. Tomas produced a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving, and they gathered around the table like the family they'd become. "To Evelyn," Jessie said, raising his glass, "who came here with nothing and built everything." "To all of us," Evelyn corrected. "None of this works without everyone here." They drank to that, and the conversation flowed easily. Plans for next year's calving season, improvements needed before winter, whether to expand the vegetable garden or focus on livestock. Later, after Jessie and Tomas had retreated to their cabin, Reed and Evelyn sat by the fire. The house was quiet, just the crackle of burning wood and the distant sound of wind through the eaves. "You happy?" Reed asked. "I think so. It's strange. Happiness wasn't really the goal. Survival was. But somewhere along the way, survival turned into something more. That's how it works out here. You survive long enough, you start living." Evelyn leaned against him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Marcus hadn't died? If I'd arrived and married him like planned?" "Sometimes. You think you would have been happy?" "I don't know. Maybe. But it would have been his life with me in it, not our life built together. There's a difference." "You think loss was necessary to get to this?" "Not necessary, just what happened. And we made something good out of it. That's probably the best anyone can hope for." Reed kissed the top of her head. "You're more philosophical than when you arrived. The frontier does that, strips away the unnecessary and shows you what actually matters. And what matters? This. Us. The land. Building something that lasts, not because it's perfect, but because we refuse to let it fail." They sat in comfortable silence, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Contentment, maybe, or just the absence of the constant anxiety that had driven her for months. The fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always be work, but the desperate scramble for survival had passed. They'd reached solid ground. Winter came hard that year, with early snows that trapped them on the ranch for weeks at a time. But they'd prepared well, with ample feed for the livestock and supplies laid in. The forced isolation became almost comfortable, the four of them working together to maintain the operation through the cold months. Evelyn discovered she was pregnant in January. The realization came slowly: missed cycles, morning sickness, a tiredness that went deeper than usual exhaustion. When she finally told Reed, his face went through several emotions before settling on something between joy and terror. "A baby." "Yes." "Here? Unless you're suggesting I have it somewhere else." Reed ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know anything about babies." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." "That's your answer for everything." "It's worked so far." Jessie's reaction was more straightforward. "About time. This place needs young blood." "It's one baby, not a population boom." "Start somewhere. Give it a few years, you'll have a whole crew running around." Evelyn wasn't sure she wanted a whole crew, but one seemed manageable. Terrifying, but manageable. The pregnancy progressed through spring and summer. Evelyn continued working as long as she could, stubborn about maintaining her role in the operation. Reed worried constantly, hovering whenever she lifted anything heavier than a coffee cup. "I'm pregnant, not fragile." "You're both, and I'm allowed to worry." "Worry quietly then. You're driving me crazy." "I'll try." He didn't try very hard, but Evelyn found his concern endearing, even when it was annoying. This was love in its practical form, not grand gestures, but daily attention to her well-being and safety. The baby came in late August during a thunderstorm, as if determined to make an entrance as dramatic as Evelyn's own arrival in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, with only Jessie's wife, Maria, who'd moved to the ranch that spring, to help since the doctor was delayed by flooding roads. When it was over and Evelyn held her daughter for the first time, she understood something she hadn't before. This child represented more than continuation or legacy. She represented the possibility that grew from choosing to stay when leaving was easier, from fighting when surrender was offered, from building when destruction seemed inevitable. "What should we name her?" Reed asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Evelyn looked at the tiny face, still red from birth, eyes squeezed shut against the lamplight. "Sarah, after my mother." "Sarah Reed, that's good. You don't get a vote." "You did the hard part. Naming her is the least I can offer." Sarah proved to be as stubborn as her mother, crying when she wanted attention and sleeping peacefully when she didn't. Evelyn learned to manage the ranch and motherhood simultaneously, which mostly meant accepting that nothing would ever run as smoothly as it had before. Jesse and Tomas built a larger crib than necessary because, as Jesse explained, you'll need it for the next one. There might not be a next one. There will be. You're that type. Evelyn didn't argue because she suspected he was right. The years that followed developed their own rhythm. Sarah grew from infant to toddler to a small person with opinions about everything. A son followed 2 years later, Thomas, named for Reed's deceased brother. Then another daughter, Caroline, who arrived with minimal fuss and maximum volume. The ranch expanded gradually. They bought adjacent land when a neighbor sold out, carefully increasing their holdings without overextending. The railway brought steady business, and they developed a reputation for reliable quality that commanded premium prices. Jesse and Maria had children of their own, and Tomas eventually married a woman from Silver Ridge, who proved to be an excellent hand with horses. The ranch became less a business and more a community, multiple families working together toward shared success. But success didn't mean ease. There were drought years when they barely scraped by, winters that killed livestock despite best efforts, market crashes that devastated profits. They learned to weather these storms the same way they'd weathered everything else, by refusing to quit and supporting each other through the worst. On Sarah's 10th birthday, Evelyn stood on the porch watching her daughter chase her brothers through the yard, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. Reed came up beside her, older now, with gray threading through his hair, but still solid and steady. "You thinking about how far we've come?" he asked. "How far I've come. From a desperate woman with no future to this." "You were never desperate. Determined, maybe, but not desperate." "That's revisionist history." "Maybe, but I prefer my version." Evelyn leaned into him. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on me?" "Not once. You?" "Never." It was true. The life she'd built bore no resemblance to the one she'd imagined leaving Boston. It was harder, more uncertain, filled with challenges she'd never anticipated. But it was hers in ways that mattered more than comfort or ease. She'd learned that belonging isn't about fitting into something that already exists. Sometimes it's about creating space for yourself where none existed before, then defending that space until it becomes home. Marcus Hale had offered her an opportunity, but she'd transformed it into something he probably never envisioned. The ranch wasn't what he'd built. It was what she and Reed had built together from the ashes of his failure and the complications of her arrival. That felt right. Life rarely followed plans, but sometimes the detours led to better destinations than the original route would have reached. Jesse walked over, now fully gray and moving slower but still sharp as ever. "You two getting sentimental in your old age?" "We're not old," Evelyn protested. "You're 32. That's middle-aged by frontier standards." "Then the frontier has low standards." "Always has." Jesse looked out at the children playing. "You've built something good here, better than most manage." "We've been lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought for this every step, made smart choices when quitting was easier. That's not luck, that's character." "Philosophical, Jesse? I'm not sure I can handle it." "Don't have to handle it, just accept the compliment and move on." After Jesse left, Reed turned to Evelyn. "He's right, you know, about the fighting, about the choices. We both fought, both made choices." "But you started it. I just followed." "You did more than follow." "Maybe. But you're the one who refused to give up when any reasonable person would have. That set the tone for everything that came after." Evelyn thought about her first night in Silver Ridge, alone in Mrs. Chen's boarding house, with nothing but a dead man's letter and dwindling hope. She'd had every reason to quit, to go home, to accept defeat. But something in her had refused. Maybe that refusal was the most important choice she'd ever made. Not because it guaranteed success, it hadn't, but because it opened the door to possibility. Everything that followed flowed from that single stubborn decision to stay and see what she could build. The frontier had taught her things no Boston drawing room ever could. That comfort and safety are less valuable than purpose and agency. That failure is only permanent if you let it be. That home isn't where you're born, but where you choose to fight for your place. She'd come west looking for security through marriage and found something better, autonomy earned through struggle, partnership built on mutual respect, and a life that was genuinely her own. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Evelyn and Reed sat on the porch they'd repaired a dozen times over the years. The view hadn't changed much, same mesas in the distance, same vast sky overhead, same sense of endless possibility in every direction. "What are you thinking?" Reed asked. "That I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts." "The hard parts made everything else possible." "I know. That's why I'm grateful for them too." They sat in comfortable silence, and Evelyn felt the weight of their shared history settling around them. Every scar on the land represented a battle fought and survived. Every improvement represented a choice to stay and build rather than abandon and flee. This was what legacy meant, not inherited wealth or social position, but the tangible evidence of effort and determination. The ranch would outlast them, would pass to their children and perhaps their children's children, and the story of how it was saved and built would become part of its foundation. She thought about Marcus Hale sometimes, wondering what he would make of what his property had become. Would he recognize the small, struggling operation he'd tried to maintain in the thriving ranch it had evolved into? Would he approve of how Evelyn had taken his failed dream and transformed it into her successful reality? It didn't matter, really. He'd set events in motion, but she'd determined the outcome. That felt appropriate somehow. Life is collaboration between intention and improvisation, between what's given and what's created. The frontier was unforgiving but fair in its way. It offered no guarantees, no safety nets, no easy paths to success. But it also offered something cities couldn't: the chance to prove yourself on your own terms, to build something genuine, to become who you actually were rather than who circumstances tried to make you. Evelyn had arrived expecting to be someone's wife, someone's helpmeet, someone's solution to loneliness. Instead, she'd become herself, capable and flawed, determined and uncertain, strong enough to fight but wise enough to accept help. That person was worth more than any role or title. That person could face whatever came next without flinching. "We should go inside," Reed said eventually. "Getting cold." "In a minute, I want to remember this." "Remember what?" "This moment, this feeling, everything being exactly as it should be." Reed took her hand. "It won't always feel this way. There'll be hard times coming, challenges we can't predict." "I know, but right now everything's good, and that's worth remembering when things get difficult." They went inside together, closing the door on the cooling night. The house that had once seemed small and temporary now felt permanent and full. Children sleeping in rooms they'd added, furniture they'd built or bought, photographs documenting years of growth and change. This was what she'd really come west for, though she hadn't known it at the time. Not marriage or security or escape, but the opportunity to create a life that mattered on her own terms. To fight for something worth having and win through determination rather than circumstance. The frontier had given her that chance, and she'd seized it with both hands and refused to let go no matter how hard the struggle became. Looking back, every hardship seemed necessary. Every setback had revealed strength she didn't know she possessed. Every small victory had built confidence for larger battles ahead. She wouldn't trade any of it, not the fear or the exhaustion, not the danger or the uncertainty, not even the pain of loss that had brought her here in the first place. Because all of it together had forged her into someone capable of thriving in impossible circumstances. That was the real gift of the frontier. Not land or opportunity, but the chance to discover what you were made of when everything easy was stripped away and only necessity remained. Evelyn Reed had discovered she was made of iron and stubbornness, love and determination, hope and practical sense all wound together. And that combination had proven strong enough to build a life worth living. As she climbed into bed beside her husband, surrounded by the home they'd created and the family they'd built, she felt something she'd never experienced in Boston's drawing rooms or her aunt's cold house. She felt complete, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real and earned and absolutely her own. The frontier had tested her in ways she never imagined, and she'd passed every test not through perfection, but through persistence. That was enough. That was everything. And when morning came, she'd face whatever challenges it brought with the same stubborn determination that had carried her this far. Because she was Evelyn Reed, and she'd learned the most important lesson the frontier could teach: that home isn't where you start, but where you refuse to stop fighting for your place in the world.